The night Alara Thorne rejected the most powerful man in the kingdom, she signed her own death warrant, or so everyone thought. What happens when a low-born Omega does the unthinkable, refuses a bond with the Alpha King in front of the entire realm? Banishment, humiliation, ruin. But Alara's rejection wasn't weakness. It was the beginning of something no one saw coming. Stay until the end to see how an exiled blacksmith's daughter becomes the force that brings a corrupted kingdom to its knees. Drop a like and comment which city you're watching from. The great hall of Arkhaven stank of incense and old blood. Alara stood at the center of the ceremonial circle, her bare feet cold against the ancient stone, and tried not to think about how badly she wanted to run. The nobles packed into the cathedral-like space watched her like vultures circling a dying animal. Their silk robes shimmered under torchlight. Their eyes glittered with cruel amusement. She didn't belong here. Everyone knew it. Steady, her guardian Mira had whispered before they'd led Alara inside. Just get through the ritual, say the words, accept the bond, then it's over. But Mira didn't understand. It would never be over. The blood moon hung fat and red through the vaulted glass ceiling, casting everything in shades of rust and shadow. According to tradition, bonds formed under the blood moon were unbreakable, blessed by forces older than the kingdom itself. The priestesses in their bone-white masks had been chanting for what felt like hours, their voices rising and falling in rhythms that made Alara's teeth ache. She wore the ceremonial Omega dress they'd forced on her, thin white silk that left her arms and shoulders bare, embroidered with silver thread that was supposed to represent purity. It felt more like a burial shroud. "Bring forth the Alpha," the head priestess's voice cut through the chanting. The massive doors at the far end of the hall groaned open. Ronan Vale entered like a storm-given human form. He was tall, taller than any man Alara had ever seen, with shoulders broad enough to block out the torchlight behind him. His hair was dark, pulled back from a face that could have been carved from granite. Sharp jaw, brutal cheekbones. Eyes the color of winter steel that swept the room once before landing on her. The Alpha King. Alara's wolf stirred inside her chest, restless and frightened. She forced it down. Ronan crossed the hall in long strides, his boots echoing against stone. He wore black from throat to heel, leather and wool that spoke of battlefields rather than ballrooms. A silver crown sat heavy on his brow, but he wore it like a weapon. When he reached the circle's edge, he didn't smile, didn't soften. He simply looked at her. "Alara Thorne," the head priestess intoned. "Omega of the lower quarter. Daughter of no house." Alara heard the snickers from the crowd. Someone coughed the word blacksmith like an insult. "Ronan Vale," the priestess continued, "Alpha of Arkhaven, King of the Northern Reach, Defender of the Realm." More titles. Always more titles with men like him. The priestess raised her hands. "The moon has spoken. The bond has formed. What the blood moon joins, no mortal may sever." Except that was a lie. Alara had spent the last 3 weeks researching everything she could find about mate bonds, buried in the palace library's restricted section while Mira distracted the guards. She'd read accounts from centuries past, scholarly texts and forbidden journals written by wolves who'd tried to fight fate. You could reject a bond. It was rare. It was agonizing. But it was possible. "Step forward," the priestess commanded. Ronan moved into the circle. Up close, he was even more overwhelming. Heat and power radiating off him in waves that made Alara's skin prickle. She caught his scent, pine and steel and something wilder underneath, something that made her wolf whine. No, she couldn't let it cloud her judgment. The priestess produced a ceremonial blade, silver and ancient. "Your hands." Ronan extended his right hand without hesitation. The priestess cut a shallow line across his palm. Blood welled up, dark and red. Then she turned to Alara. Alara's hand shook as she lifted it. The blade bit quick and sharp. Blood spilled down her wrist. "Join your hands," the priestess said. "Speak the words of binding." This was it. The moment everything would be decided. Ronan's eyes met hers. For just a second, something flickered there. Was it uncertainty? No, that was impossible. Men like Ronan Vale didn't doubt anything. He reached for her bleeding hand. Alara stepped back. The hall went silent. Even the priestesses stopped chanting. "No," Alara said. The word hung in the air like a knife. Ronan froze, his hand still extended. "What did you say?" Alara's heart hammered so hard she thought it might crack her ribs. Her wolf was screaming at her, clawing at her insides, begging her to stop this madness. But she'd made her choice weeks ago. She'd known this moment would come. "I said no." Her voice came out steadier than she felt. "I reject this bond. I reject you." The hall erupted. Nobles surged to their feet, shouting over each other. The priestesses stumbled backward, their chants dissolving into chaos. Someone screamed that it was blasphemy. Someone else yelled that she should be executed on the spot. But Alara only watched Ronan. His face had gone carefully blank, the kind of blank that meant something dangerous was happening underneath. His hand slowly lowered to his side. Blood dripped from his palm onto the white stone, each drop loud as thunder. "You reject me," he repeated, his voice flat. "Yes." In front of the court, in front of the priestesses, in front of the gods themselves. "Yes." A muscle twitched in his jaw. "Do you understand what you've just done?" Alara lifted her chin. "Better than you do." That cracked something in his control. His eyes flashed gold, his wolf surging close to the surface. "I am your king, and I am not your property." The bond, Alara cut in, her voice rising, "means nothing if I don't accept it. You know the law. A bond forced is a bond broken." Ronan took a step toward her. Every instinct screamed at Alara to run, but she held her ground. "Why?" The word came out rough, like he dragged it over broken glass. For a heartbeat, Alara almost told him, almost explained the real reason, the curse she'd discovered, the danger lurking in the shadows of the palace, the terrible choice she'd been forced to make. But she couldn't. Not here. Not now. Maybe not ever. So instead, she said the only thing that would make him let her go. "Because I don't want you." It was a lie. She felt the bond between them even now, golden and fierce and pulling at her like a fishhook in her chest. Her wolf was howling, devastated by what she was doing, but lies were all she had left. Ronan stared at her for a long moment. Then something in his expression shifted, shuttered closed like a door slamming shut. "Fine," he said quietly. He turned to face the crowd. When he spoke again, his voice carried to every corner of the hall, cold and absolute. "Alara Thorne has rejected the bond granted by the Blood Moon. She has spurned fate itself." He paused. "She is hereby banished from Arkhaven. She will be escorted beyond the kingdom's borders to the Ashlands, where she will remain for the rest of her natural life. Any who aid her, shelter her, or speak her name will share her fate." The crowd roared approval. Some of the nobles actually applauded. Alara felt the words land like physical blows. The Ashlands, the place where they sent the worst criminals, the irredeemable, the already dead. No one survived there. No one came back. It was a death sentence dressed up as mercy. "Guards," Ronan said. 2 soldiers materialized at Alara's sides, gripping her arms hard enough to bruise. She didn't struggle. There was no point. As they dragged her toward the doors, Alara looked back once. Ronan stood in the center of the circle, blood still dripping from his hand, his face carved from stone. Their eyes met across the chaos of the hall. She tried to memorize his face, tried to burn this moment into her memory, because she knew with absolute certainty that she would never see him again. The last thing she heard before the doors slammed shut was the sound of the nobles laughing. The journey to the Ashlands took 3 days. They transported her in a prisoner's wagon, iron bars on all sides, no cushions, no blankets, just hard wood and cold metal, and the endless jolting of wheels over rough roads. The 2 guards who accompanied her didn't speak except to tell her when she could eat, once a day, and when she could relieve herself, twice a day, in full view of them both, because apparently even basic dignity was too much to ask. Alara spent the time watching the landscape change. First came the cultivated lands around the capital, neat farms and tidy villages, everything green and orderly. Then the outer territories, where the farms grew sparse and the forests thick. Then the borderlands, where civilization started to fray at the edges. And finally, the Ashlands. She smelled it before she saw it, acrid and bitter, like something burning that should never burn. The trees here were twisted things, blackened and stunted. The ground looked scorched, even though no fires burned. A thin gray haze hung over everything, turning the sun into a sickly yellow disk. "End of the line," one of the guards said. The wagon stopped. They unlocked the cage and hauled Alara out, not gently. Her legs nearly buckled after 3 days of sitting, but she forced herself to stand. They were at the edge of a cliff. Below stretched a vast wasteland, all ash and rock and skeletal trees as far as she could see. In the distance, she could just make out what might have been structures. Ruins, maybe, or settlements built from desperation. "This is where you get off," the guard said. He pointed to a narrow path that switchbacked down the cliff face. "Path takes you down. After that, you're on your own." The other guard tossed a bundle at her feet. "Food and water, enough for 3 days if you're careful. More than you deserve." Alara picked up the bundle. It was light, too light. She doubted there was even 1 day's worth of supplies inside. "What's down there, Shah?" she asked. The first guard shrugged. "Exiles, criminals, things that used to be human. Does it matter?" "Will anyone? No one's going to help you," he cut in. "You're Omega. Weak. You'll be dead by nightfall." He smiled. "If you're lucky." They climbed back onto the wagon. The driver cracked his whip. Within moments, they were disappearing back down the road, leaving Alara alone at the edge of the world. She stood there for a long time, staring down at the ashlands. Her wolf was silent now, withdrawn deep inside, nursing its wounds from the broken bond. Alara could still feel the phantom pain of it, like a tooth that had been ripped out, leaving nothing but an aching hole. She'd made her choice. Now she had to live with it, or die with it. Alara shouldered the pitiful supply bundle and started down the path. The path was treacherous, loose stones and sharp switchbacks that made every step a calculated risk. Twice, rocks gave way under her feet, sending her sliding. By the time she reached the bottom, her hands were scraped raw and her knees were bleeding through her dress. The ceremonial silk was already ruined, torn and stained with dirt and blood. Alara looked down at herself and almost laughed. 3 days ago, they dressed her like a bride. Now she looked like a corpse. She was standing in what might have once been a riverbed, long since dried up. The ground was cracked and dusty. Strange plants grew in twisted clusters, thorny things with leaves the color of bruises. Alara checked her supplies. 1 skin of water, already half empty from the journey. A heel of bread so hard she'd probably break a tooth on it. A small knife barely sharp enough to cut cheese. 3 days of supplies, the guard had said. He'd been generous. This was maybe 1 day if she was careful. She picked a direction toward what she thought might be the structures she'd seen from above, and started walking. The ashlands were worse up close. The air itself felt wrong, like it was too thin or too thick or just fundamentally not meant for breathing. Every breath tasted like ash. The ground crunched under her feet, and when she looked down, she saw bones. Small ones, animal probably, half buried in the gray dirt. She'd been walking for maybe an hour when she heard the voices. Alara froze. The voices were coming from somewhere ahead, rough and low, speaking in tones that made the hair on her neck stand up. She crept forward, using the twisted trees for cover, until she could see them. 3 men, or things that used to be men. They were filthy, dressed in rags, with wild hair and wilder eyes. One of them was holding what looked like a dead rabbit. Another was sharpening a knife on a stone. The third was scanning the horizon, his posture alert. Bandits. Or worse. Alara started to back away. If she was careful, if she was quiet. A stick cracked under her foot. All 3 heads snapped toward her. "Well, well," the one with the knife said. "Look what wandered into our territory." Alara ran. She crashed through the brush, branches tearing at her dress and skin. Behind her, she heard them give chase, footsteps pounding, voices shouting, "Get her! Fresh meat! But don't damage her too much. We can get good coin for an Omega." Alara's lungs burned. Her legs screamed. She wasn't built for this. She was a blacksmith's apprentice, used to standing at a forge, not sprinting through a wasteland. She risked a glance back. They were gaining. Then her foot caught on something and she went down hard, smashing into the ground face first. Stars exploded across her vision. She tasted blood. "Got you?" one of them panted, grabbing her ankle. Alara kicked blindly. Her heel connected with something soft. The man yelped and let go. She scrambled to her feet, but another one was already there, grabbing her arm. His breath stank like rotting meat. "Pretty thing," he crooned. "Been a long time since we had anything pretty." Alara drove her knee up into his groin as hard as she could. He howled and dropped, clutching himself. But the third one was on her now, bigger and stronger, wrapping his arms around her from behind. "Stop fighting," he growled in her ear. "Just makes it worse." Alara's hand found the tiny knife in her bundle. She yanked it free and stabbed backward blindly. The knife sank into something. The man screamed and released her. She didn't wait. She ran again, her whole body shaking, blood on her hands. His or hers, she didn't know. She ran until her legs gave out, until she collapsed behind a cluster of rocks and curled up small, trying not to sob. This was the first hour. She wasn't going to last 3 days. She wasn't going to last 3 more hours. Alara pressed her face against the cold stone and tried to remember why she'd done this. The curse, the danger, the impossible choice. It didn't feel like enough anymore. Sost. She must have passed out because when she opened her eyes again, the sun had moved. Alara sat up slowly, every muscle screaming. Her face hurt. Her hands hurt. Everything hurt. She was still alive, though. That was something. She checked her supplies. The water skin had torn in the fight. Most of the water was gone, soaked into the gray earth. The bread was gone too, probably lost in the chase. So she had nothing. Perfect. Alara forced herself to stand. She needed to keep moving. Needed to find shelter before dark. She heard it then. A sound that didn't belong. Metal on metal, rhythmic and purposeful. Hammering. Alara's heart jumped. She knew that sound. She'd grown up with that sound. In her guardian's smithy in the lower quarter of Arkhaven. Someone was working metal, which meant there was someone here who wasn't trying to kill her. Maybe. She followed the sound, moving carefully now, every sense alert. The hammering grew louder, more distinct, and then she saw it. A structure built into the side of a rock formation. Not ruins. An actual building, crude but functional, with smoke rising from what had to be a forged chimney. A smithy. Here, in the ashlands. Alara approached slowly. The door was open. Inside, she could see a figure bent over an anvil, bringing a hammer down in steady, practiced strikes. She cleared her throat. "Hello?" The hammering stopped. The figure straightened and turned. It was a woman, older, maybe 50, with silver hair pulled back in a practical braid. Her arms were corded with muscle. Her face was weathered but sharp, with eyes that assessed Alara in one sweeping glance. "You're new," the woman said. Yes." "Exiled?" Alara nodded. The woman set down her hammer. "Recent, by the look of you. Still wearing palace silk." Her eyes narrowed. "What did you do? Murder someone?" "I rejected the Alpha King." The woman's eyebrows shot up. Then she started to laugh, a harsh barking sound. "You've got stones, girl. I'll give you that." She picked up a rag and wiped her hands. "Name's Kael. This is my forge. You got a name, or should I just call you Dead Girl Walking?" "Alara." "Lara," Kael repeated. She looked Alara up and down again. "You know anything useful? Can you smith? Can you fight? Can you do anything except stand there bleeding?" "I can smith," Alara said. "My guardian trained me. Weapons, mostly. Some tools." Kael's expression shifted, still skeptical, but with a hint of interest. "That's so." She jerked her head toward the anvil. "Show me." Alara stepped into the forge. The heat hit her like a wall, but it was a good heat, familiar and solid and real. Kael handed her the hammer and pointed to a piece of metal heating in the coals. "Make me a knife," she said. "Nothing fancy, just functional." Alara pulled the metal from the fire and set it on the anvil. The hammer felt right in her hand, balanced and sure. She could still hear Mira's voice. "The metal tells you what it wants to be. Your job is to listen." She hammered the metal, feeling it respond, folded it, heated it again, hammered more. The rhythm came back to her like breathing, natural and necessary. When she finished, she quenched the blade and held it up. Kael took it, testing the edge with her thumb. She was quiet for a long moment. "It'll do," she finally said, which Alara suspected was high praise from someone like Kael. "You can stay. I've got a spare room in the back. It's not much. Dirt floor, one blanket, probably rats. But it's better than sleeping in the open. Why are you helping me? Kael shrugged. Because I remember what it's like, being new here. Fresh off the exile wagon, no idea how to survive, everyone ready to gut you for your shoes. She met Alara's eyes. And because good smiths are rare in the Ashlands, you want to survive here, girl, you need to be useful. I'm giving you a chance to be useful. What do you want in return? Work. You'll help in the forge, make what needs making. In exchange, you get a roof and food and protection. Protection? Kael gestured out the door. You saw them already, didn't you? The scavengers. They run in packs out here, preying on anyone who looks weak. You're Omega, you're young, you're new. To them, you're nothing but meat. She picked up her hammer again. But if you're with me, they'll think twice. I've got a reputation here. What kind of reputation? Kael smiled, and it wasn't a kind smile. The kind that makes people remember what happens when you cross me. She pointed the hammer at Alara. So, you want to live, or you want to be stubborn? It wasn't really a choice. Alara nodded. Good, Kael said. Then get that torn-up dress off and put on some real clothes. There's work to do, and Palace Silk won't protect you from anything out here. The next few weeks passed in a blur of heat and hammer, and learning how to survive in a place that wanted her dead. Kael was a harsh teacher, but a fair one. She showed Alara where to find water, underground springs, if you knew where to dig, where to find food, tough gray roots that tasted like dirt but kept you alive, and who to avoid, pretty much everyone except the handful of people Kael traded with. The Ashlands, Alara learned, had a brutal kind of order. There were maybe 200 people scattered across the wasteland, all exiles, all criminals or rebels, or people like Alara who'd pissed off someone powerful. Some lived alone in caves or ruins. Others formed small groups, territories marked by blood and violence. Kael's smithy sat in neutral ground, which meant everyone needed her too much to attack her. As long as Alara stayed close, she was safe. Mostly. She still had close calls. Like the time she went to fetch water from the spring and ran into a pack of younger exiles who thought she'd be easy prey. She'd had to break one's nose with her water jug and run, heart pounding, back to the forge. Or the time she was delivering a repaired blade to one of Kael's clients, and the man had tried to grab her, saying something about how pretty Omegas shouldn't walk around alone. Kael had appeared from nowhere and shattered his wrist with one blow of her hammer. Touch her again, Kael had said calmly, and I'll do worse than break bones. Alara learned to move differently in the Ashlands, always alert, always ready to fight or run. She learned to hide her Omega scent with ash and dirt. She learned which paths were safe and which ones led to ambush points. And slowly, grudgingly, she learned that there was more to this place than cruelty. There was a healer named Torin who tended wounds for anyone who asked, charging only what they could afford. There was a woman named Shale who organized food shares, making sure the weaker exiles didn't starve. There was an old man called Beacon who maintained a fire at the highest point of the settlement so people wouldn't get lost in the ash storms. These weren't heroes. They were survivors, same as her. But they were trying to build something out of nothing. It made Alara wonder, if people could do that here, in this wasteland, what could they have done in Arkhaven with resources and support? But Arkhaven didn't want them. Arkhaven had thrown them away, just like it had thrown her away. 2 months after her exile, everything changed. Alara was at the forge, working on a new set of kitchen knives for Shale when she heard the commotion outside. Shouting. The sound of horses, which was strange because horses rarely came this deep into the Ashlands. Kael appeared in the doorway, her face grim. Soldiers, she said, royal soldiers, coming through the settlement. Alara's heart stopped. Why? Same reason they always come, to take whatever they want and call it the king's due. They went outside. Half the settlement had gathered in what passed for a main square, a flat area of ash-covered ground surrounded by ramshackle buildings. Mounted soldiers sat on their horses, maybe a dozen of them, all wearing the black and silver of the royal guard. The captain, a hard-faced woman with a scar across her cheek, held up a rolled parchment. By order of King Ronan Vale, she announced, her voice carrying, the crown requires supplies from this territory. Food, water, and any coin or valuables will be collected as tax. Tax? someone shouted. We're exiles. We don't owe the crown anything. The captain's smile was cold. You breathe kingdom air. You drink kingdom water. You owe what the king says you owe. The soldiers dismounted and began moving through the crowd, grabbing packs, tearing open supply bundles. One soldier yanked a loaf of bread from an old man's hands. Another dumped out a woman's water skin and took the skin itself, leaving her with nothing. Alara watched, fury building in her chest. These people had almost nothing, and now even that was being stolen, in Ronan's name. This isn't taxation, Alara said, stepping forward. This is theft. The captain's eyes fixed on her. And who are you? Someone who knows the law. The Ashlands are beyond the kingdom's borders. Your authority ends at the cliffs. The king's authority, the captain said slowly, ends where he says it ends. Does the king know you're doing this? Or are you pocketing these supplies for yourself? The captain's face darkened. She dismounted and crossed to Alara in 3 long strides. Careful, girl. Exiles who cause problems have a way of disappearing. Is that a threat? It's a promise. Before Alara could respond, Kael was there, stepping between them. We don't want trouble, she said. Take what you need and go. The captain looked at Kael, then back at Alara. Smart woman, your friend. You should listen to her. But Alara was barely listening because she'd just noticed something, the captain's supply bag hanging from her saddle. It had the royal seal on it, which was normal. But underneath that seal was another mark, barely visible. A mark Alara recognized, the mark of House Corvain. Her breath caught. House Corvain was the most powerful noble family in Arkaven, second only to the crown itself. They controlled the kingdom's mines and most of its wealth. And their mark shouldn't be on a royal soldier's supplies unless the soldiers weren't acting on the king's orders at all. Unless someone else was pulling the strings. Alara's mind raced. If House Corvain was operating in the Ashlands without royal authority, that meant they had their own agenda. But what? What could they possibly want from exiles who had nothing? The soldiers finished their collection and remounted. The captain gave Alara one last warning look. Stay quiet, girl, she said. Next time, I won't be so generous. Then they rode off, leaving the settlement in chaos. People dug through what was left of their supplies, trying to see what could be salvaged. Some were crying, others were cursing. All of them were hungry and scared. Alara looked at Kael. How often does this happen? Once a month? Like clockwork. They show up, take what they want, leave. We've tried hiding supplies, but they always find them. Some people think they have informants here. And Ronan, the king, he really ordered this? Kael shrugged. That's what they say, but who knows? Maybe he did. Maybe he's just that much of a bastard. She gave Alara a sharp look. Why do you care? You rejected him, remember? Alara didn't answer, because the truth was complicated. She'd rejected Ronan to protect him, to protect everyone, from something she'd discovered in the palace archives. A curse that had been laid on House Vale generations ago, a curse that would activate if the Alpha King bonded with someone from a specific bloodline. Alara's bloodline. She'd only learned about it 3 weeks before the ceremony, buried in a crumbling journal written by a royal archivist who'd been executed for knowing too much. The curse was designed to corrupt the bonded pair, turning them into vessels for dark power that would tear the kingdom apart from within. The only way to prevent it was to refuse the bond entirely. So Alara had made her choice. She'd rejected Ronan, accepted exile, condemned herself to this wasteland, all to keep the curse from activating. But now soldiers were terrorizing exiles in Ronan's name, carrying supplies marked with House Corvain's seal, acting like they had authority they shouldn't have. Something was very, very wrong. And Alara was starting to suspect that her sacrifice might have been for nothing. That night, Alara couldn't sleep. She lay on her thin blanket in Kael's back room, staring at the ceiling and trying to make sense of what she'd seen. The pieces didn't fit. If Ronan was ordering these raids, why would House Corvain be involved? And if House Corvain was acting independently, how were they doing it without the king noticing? Unless Ronan was compromised somehow. Unless someone had gotten to him. The thought made Alara's chest tight. She told herself it didn't matter. She'd rejected him. She'd walked away. His problems weren't hers anymore. But she kept seeing his face that night in the ceremonial hall, the flash of hurt before his expression went cold, The way he'd stood there, bleeding, as she destroyed everything between them. She'd done it to save him. But what if it hadn't worked? What if she just made everything worse? Alara rolled over, punching the flat excuse for a pillow. She needed to stop thinking about this. She needed to focus on surviving tomorrow, and the day after that, and the scream cut through the night like a knife. Alara was on her feet instantly, grabbing the knife she kept under her makeshift pillow. She heard Kyle moving in the next room, cursing. "What was that?" Alara called. "Nothing good. Stay here." But Alara was already moving, following Kyle out into the settlement. Other people were emerging from their shelters, carrying torches and weapons, all looking toward the source of the scream. Someone was running toward them. A young man, maybe 17, his face streaked with tears. "They took her," he sobbed. "They took my sister." "Who took her?" Kyle demanded. "The soldiers. They came back, said they forgot something. They grabbed Mira and dragged her onto a horse." Alara's blood went cold. "Mira? She's 15, the boy gasped. "Just 15. They said the king wanted pretty girls for the palace." He didn't need to finish. Everyone understood what that meant. Kael's face went hard as stone. "Which direction?" The boy pointed toward the eastern path. "How long ago?" 5 minutes, maybe less." 5 minutes. They might still be close. Alara was already running before she made a conscious decision to move. Behind her, she heard Kyle shouting, "Alara, don't be stupid!" But she didn't stop. She'd rejected Ronan to save him from a curse. She'd walked away from everything she knew. She'd nearly died a dozen times in this wasteland. She'd be damned if she let his soldiers, real or fake, steal children in his name. Alara ran through the ash-covered paths, following the sound of hoofbeats. Her lungs burned. Her legs screamed. But she pushed harder, drawing on reserves she didn't know she had. She saw them ahead, 4 soldiers on horseback moving at a trot. One of them had a girl slung across his saddle, gagged and struggling. Alara didn't have a plan. Didn't have weapons besides her small knife. Didn't have backup. She had rage, though, and that would have to be enough. "Stop!" she screamed. The soldiers turned. The one carrying the girl laughed. "Look," he called to his companions. "It's the little Omega from earlier. Come to beg?" Alara stopped running, breathing hard. "Let her go." "Or what?" Alara didn't answer. Instead, she did something she'd sworn she'd never do again. She reached for her wolf. The bond with Ronan was broken, yes. But that didn't mean she was powerless. She was still Omega, still wolf, still connected to the ancient power that ran through every member of her kind. She'd just been too afraid to use it. Not anymore. Alara let her wolf rise. Not a full shift. She didn't have the strength for that, but enough. Enough for her eyes to flash gold. Enough for her scent to flood the air with Omega power, primal and undeniable. Enough to remind these soldiers what they were dealing with. The horses spooked, dancing sideways. The soldier holding the girl had to grab his saddle to keep from being thrown. "What the—" "I said," Alara repeated, her voice rougher now, layered with wolf resonance. "Let her go." One of the other soldiers drew his sword. "You're out of your mind, girl." "Maybe, but I'm not letting you take her." The soldier urged his horse forward, sword raised. Alara stood her ground, even though every instinct screamed at her to run. The horse was 3 steps away when the arrow took the soldier in the shoulder. He shouted and fell from his saddle. The other soldiers whirled around. Kyle stood on a rock outcropping behind them, a crossbow in her hands and a feral grin on her face. "You wanted a fight?" she called. "You've got one." Then the rest of the settlement arrived. They came from the rocks and shadows. Not many, maybe 20 people, but all armed and all furious. These were the exiles, the forgotten, the people who'd been pushed too far for too long, and they'd had enough. The soldiers tried to fight, tried to retreat, but they were outnumbered and caught off guard. Within minutes, 3 were on the ground, disarmed and restrained. The 4th, the one holding the girl, had managed to get his horse turned around. He looked at Alara one last time. "The king will hear about this," he snarled. "Good," Alara said. "Tell him Alara Thorne sends her regards." The soldier's face went white. Then he spurred his horse and fled into the darkness. Alara ran to the girl, pulling her from the fallen soldier's horse. The girl was crying, shaking, but alive. "You're safe," Alara told her. "It's over." But even as she said it, she knew it was a lie. It wasn't over. It was just beginning. The captured soldiers were bound and dragged back to the settlement center, where torches had been lit in a rough circle. Alara watched as Kael and two others, a scarred man named Dane and a woman with iron-gray hair called Vex, tied the soldiers to posts that had probably been used for this exact purpose before. The girl Alara had saved, Mira, was with her brother now, wrapped in blankets and crying quietly. Her brother kept thanking Alara over and over until she had to walk away because the gratitude felt like acid in her throat. She hadn't saved anyone. She'd just bought them all a different kind of death. "You realize what you've done," Kael said, appearing beside her. It wasn't a question. "They were taking a child," Alara said. "And now they'll come back with more soldiers. Maybe a whole battalion. They'll burn this place to ash and everyone in it." "So what was I supposed to do? Let them take her?" Kael was quiet for a moment. Then she sighed, rough and tired. "No. You did the right thing. Doesn't mean it won't get us all killed." The settlement had gathered around the prisoners now. People were shouting, demanding answers. One of the soldiers, the youngest one, barely 20, looked terrified. The other two just looked defiant. Dane stepped forward, a knife in his hand. "Who sent you?" he demanded. The oldest soldier, the one with sergeant stripes, spat at his feet. "You're all dead. When the king hears about this—" "The king," Alara cut in, pushing through the crowd, "doesn't know you're here, does he?" The sergeant's eyes flicked to her, then away. Too fast. Guilty. "I saw the mark on your supplies," Alara continued. "House Corvain's seal. You're not here on royal orders. You're working for them." "You don't know what you're talking about." "Then prove me wrong. Show me your official orders, the ones signed by King Ronan himself." The sergeant's jaw clenched. He didn't answer. The crowd started murmuring. People weren't stupid. They'd all noticed that these raids had gotten worse in recent months, more frequent and more brutal. But they'd assumed it was the king's doing, that Ronan Vale had simply stopped caring about the exiles beyond his borders. Now, though, doubt was creeping in. "What does House Corvain want with the Ashlands?" Vex asked. The sergeant stayed silent. Dane pressed his knife against the man's throat. "Answer the question. Go to hell. You first." "Wait," Alara said sharply. She crouched down in front of the youngest soldier, the terrified one. "What's your name?" The boy swallowed hard. Tomas. Tomas. How long have you been a soldier?" 6 months. "First posting?" He nodded. "So you probably don't know much about what's really going on. You're just following orders, right?" Yes." "Who gives you those orders? The sergeant?" "No, a lord from House Corvain, Lord Merrick." The sergeant made a strangled sound. "Shut your mouth, you little—" Dane backhanded him. "Let the boy talk." Tomas was shaking now, but the words kept spilling out. "Lord Merrick comes once a month. He tells us what to collect, who to take. He pays us extra to keep quiet about it. Says it's kingdom business. Says the king approved it, but—" His voice cracked. "But we never saw any official papers. And the things he makes us take— food, water, people— it doesn't make sense if it's for the crown. The crown doesn't need to steal from exiles." "What does he do with the people you take?" Alara asked quietly. "I don't know. We bring them to a camp about a day's ride east, then Lord Merrick's personal guards take them from there. We're not allowed to ask questions." Alara stood up slowly, her mind racing. A camp, people being taken. House Corvain operating in secret. This was bigger than raids. This was something organized, something planned, something that stank of the same corruption she'd been trying to prevent. "We need to let them go," she said. The crowd erupted. People shouted protests, called her crazy, demanded blood for blood. "They took our supplies. They stole children." "Why should we show them mercy?" Alara raised her voice over the chaos. "Because killing them won't solve anything. But if we let them go, let Tomas go, they'll report back to Lord Merrick. And when they do, he'll know we're not just going to roll over anymore. And then he'll send more soldiers to wipe us out," someone yelled. "Maybe. Or maybe he'll realize it's not worth the risk. Maybe he'll back off." "You're betting all our lives on maybe," Vex said flatly. I'm betting on the fact that House Corvain is doing something illegal, something they're hiding from the king, and people who are hiding things don't want attention drawn to them. Kale crossed her arms. That's a hell of a gamble. You got a better idea? No one answered. Alara turned to Dane. Cut them loose. All of them. Give them enough water to make it back to wherever they came from, then send them on their way. Dane looked at Kael. Kael looked at Vex. Finally, Kael shrugged. It's your funeral, she said. But fine. We'll do it your way. It took another hour of arguing, but eventually the settlement agreed. The soldiers were unbound, given water and a single horse to share, then sent stumbling back into the darkness with a warning. If they ever came back, there wouldn't be mercy a second time. Tomas was the last to leave. He paused at the edge of the torchlight, looking back at Alara. Why? He asked. Why let us go? Because you're just a kid doing what you were told, and because I need you to deliver a message. What message? Tell Lord Merrick that the Ashlands aren't his hunting ground anymore. Tell him we know what he's doing, and tell him that if he wants to keep it quiet, he'll stay away. Tomas nodded slowly, then disappeared into the night. When the last of the soldiers was gone, Alara felt the adrenaline drain out of her all at once. Her legs went weak. She sat down hard on the ash-covered ground and put her head in her hands. Kale sat down beside her. You okay? No. Fair enough. Kale was quiet for a moment. You really think they'll back off? I have no idea. Then why'd you let them go? Alara lifted her head. Because killing them would have made us just like them, and because... She hesitated. Because I need to know more about what House Corvain is doing, and I can't do that if we're in the middle of a war. You planning on investigating? I'm planning on not dying in my sleep because some noble decided the Ashlands are convenient for his schemes. Kale nodded slowly. You know, when you first showed up here in that ridiculous white dress, I figured you'd be dead in a week. Thanks for the vote of confidence. But you're tougher than you look. Smarter, too. Kyle stood up, dusting ash off her pants. So here's my advice. Whatever you're planning, do it fast, because House Corvain isn't going to forget this. And when they come back, and they will come back, it's going to be bad. Alara knew she was right. She'd just made an enemy of one of the most powerful houses in the kingdom. But then again, she'd already made an enemy of the king himself. What was one more? The next morning, Alara woke to find half the settlement gathered outside Kael's forge. She stumbled out, still rubbing sleep from her eyes, and found them all staring at her. What? She asked. An older woman stepped forward, one Alara recognized from the food shares. We want to know what happens next. Next? You stood up to those soldiers. You sent them running. Now what? Alara blinked. I don't know. I was just trying to help. Well, you did more than help, Dane said. He was there too, arms crossed. You gave people hope. First time in years anyone's fought back against those bastards. That doesn't mean... We want to organize, Vex interrupted. Set up real defenses. Make sure they can't just waltz in here and take whatever they want. I'm not a leader, Alara protested. You're the closest thing we've got. Alara looked around at the faces watching her. Scarred, weathered, desperate. These were people who'd lost everything, who'd been thrown away by the kingdom and left to die. And now they were looking at her like she had answers. She didn't. She barely knew how to survive herself, but she couldn't just say no. Okay, she said slowly, we can organize. Set up watches, build some fortifications, train people to fight, but I'm not in charge. This has to be a group effort. Someone needs to coordinate it, Dane said. Then we'll form a council. 5 people, voted on by everyone. They make decisions together. Kale snorted. Democracy in the Ashlands. That'll be interesting. But the crowd seemed to like the idea. People started talking, nominating candidates, debating who should lead what. Within an hour, they'd settled on 5 council members. Kale, Dane, Vex, a quiet man named Oren who ran the water distribution, and Alara herself. She'd tried to decline. They'd voted her in anyway. Congratulations, Kael said dryly. You're officially part of the worst governing body in history. The council's first meeting happened that afternoon in Kael's forge because it was the biggest enclosed space they had. The 5 of them sat around a makeshift table, really just a few boards laid across empty barrels, and tried to figure out how to defend a settlement that had never needed defending before. "We need weapons," Dane said. "Real ones, not just kitchen knives and farming tools." "I can make weapons," Alara said, "but it'll take time, and we need better metal than what we've got." "There's an old mine about 3 miles north," Oren offered. "Abandoned years ago. Might still have ore." "I'll check it out," Dane said. "We also need lookouts," Vex added. "People watching the paths, ready to sound an alarm if soldiers come back." They spent 2 hours hashing out details: watch rotations, defensive positions, who could fight, and who needed protection. It was exhausting and frustrating, with everyone arguing over every little point, but it was also working. Slowly, they were building something. As the meeting was breaking up, Oren pulled Alara aside. "Can I talk to you, privately?" Alara followed him outside. Oren was maybe 60, with a face like old leather and eyes that had seen too much. He rarely spoke at gatherings, preferring to listen. "What is it?" Alara asked. Oren glanced around, making sure they were alone. "You asked about what House Corvain might be doing. I might know something." Alara's pulse quickened. "What?" "About 2 years ago, before the raids got bad, I was ranging farther out than usual, looking for new water sources. I found a valley, maybe 4 days east of here. Hidden, hard to reach, and there was a camp there." "What kind of camp?" "The kind with walls and guards and buildings. Not temporary, permanent. I didn't get close enough to see what they were doing, but I saw people, lots of them, being marched in under guard." "You think that's where they're taking the ones they kidnap?" Oren nodded. "And I think whatever they're doing there, it's not good. The people I saw, they looked sick, weak, like they were being worked to death." "Why didn't you tell anyone?" "Who was I going to tell? Everyone here's got enough problems without worrying about some secret camp. And besides, what could we do about it? We're exiles. Nobody cares what happens to us." He was right, of course. The kingdom had abandoned these people. But Alara wasn't part of the kingdom anymore. "Could you find it again?" she asked. "The valley?" Oren hesitated. "Probably, but it's dangerous. The terrain's rough, and if House Corvain has guards posted, I need to see it. I need to know what they're doing." "Why? What difference does it make?" "Because if House Corvain is building something in secret, using kidnapped exiles for labor, it means they're planning something big. And if they're planning something big without the king knowing, it means the kingdom is already being corrupted from within, which meant Alara's sacrifice had been for nothing. She'd rejected Ronan to prevent a curse from activating, but the corruption was happening anyway, just from a different source. She needed to know, needed to understand what was really going on. "It makes a difference," she said simply. "Trust me." Oren studied her for a long moment. Then he sighed. "You're going to get yourself killed." "Probably. Will you show me anyway?" "When do we leave?" Otsem. They set out 3 days later, at dawn. Alara had wanted to go alone, but Oren insisted on guiding her, and Dane refused to let them go without backup. So the three of them headed east, carrying minimal supplies and weapons Alara had forged in marathon sessions at the forge. The journey was brutal. The ashlands were bad enough near the settlement, but deeper in, they became truly hellish. The ground turned from ash to jagged rock. Crevasses opened up without warning, deep enough to swallow a person whole. The air grew thicker, harder to breathe, tasting of sulfur and decay. They saw no one else. Whatever exiles lived this far out either hid very well or didn't exist at all. On the second day, they reached what Oren called the Scar, a massive canyon that split the landscape like a wound. The only way across was a rope bridge that looked about a century past safe. "Are you serious?" Dane said, staring at the swaying, half-rotted mess. "It held 2 years ago," Oren said. 2 years is a long time for rope." But there was no other option. They crossed one at a time, gripping the ropes with white knuckles, while the bridge swayed sickeningly over the drop. Alara went last, trying not to look down at the darkness below. She was halfway across when one of the boards cracked under her foot. For a heart-stopping second, she was falling. Then her hand caught the rope, and she jerked to a halt, dangling over nothing. The board tumbled away into darkness. "Alara!" Dane was reaching for her from the other side. She hauled herself up, hand over hand, until she could get her feet back on the bridge. The rest of the crossing took an eternity. When she finally made it to solid ground, she collapsed, shaking. "You good?" Dane asked. "Amazing. Never better." "Liar." They pushed on. By the third day, Alara's body was screaming. Her feet were blistered. Her shoulders ached from carrying her pack. Every breath felt like inhaling sandpaper. But when they crested a ridge at sunset, she forgot about all of it. The valley spread out below them, hidden between steep cliffs. And Oren had been right. There was a camp, a massive one. Wooden palisades surrounded dozens of buildings. Guard towers dotted the perimeter. Alara could see people moving inside, lots of them. And at the center of the camp stood a structure that didn't belong in the Ashlands at all. A stone building, 3 stories tall, with windows that glowed with firelight. "What in the hell are they doing out here?" Dane whispered. Alara shook her head. She didn't know. But whatever it was big. They waited until full dark, then crept closer. Oren led them to a position on a cliff overlooking the camp, where they could watch without being seen. What Alara saw made her blood run cold. The people in the camp weren't just workers, they were prisoners. She could see the chains, the guards with whips, the way people moved with the broken shuffle of those who'd given up hope. They were digging. Massive pits at the valley's far end, extending deep into the earth. Alara couldn't tell what they were digging for, but cart after cart of earth and rock was being hauled up and dumped. "It's a mine," Dane said quietly. "They're mining something." "But what?" Alara asked. "The Ashlands don't have anything valuable. That's why it's a wasteland." "Maybe they found something new." They watched for hours, taking turns keeping lookout. Alara saw children among the workers, saw people collapse from exhaustion and get dragged away, saw guards laughing while prisoners suffered. And she saw something else. Nobles. Not many, but enough. Men and women in fine clothes, walking through the camp like they owned it, inspecting the pits, talking to guards. One of them wore the colors of House Corvain. "There," Alara breathed, pointing. "That's Lord Merrick. Has to be." The man was tall and thin, with silver hair and the kind of face that looked cruel even from a distance. He stood at the edge of one of the pits, gesturing angrily at a foreman who was nodding frantically. Then Lord Merrick turned and walked into the stone building. "I need to get closer," Alara said. "Are you insane?" Dane hissed. "The place is crawling with guards." "Well, I need to know what they're mining, what they're doing." "You'll get caught." "Not if I'm careful." "Alara?" But she was already moving, sliding down the cliff face toward the camp's edge. Behind her, she heard Dane cursing quietly and Oren saying something about "damn fool Omega." The camp's perimeter wasn't as secure as it looked. The guards were lazy, bored from months of watching prisoners who had nowhere to run. Alara found a gap between 2 watchtowers and slipped through, pressing herself against the palisade wall. She could hear voices now, guards talking about dice games and complaining about the food, prisoners weeping quietly and whatever passed for their barracks. Alara worked her way around the camp's edge, staying in shadows, until she reached one of the mining pits. This close, she could see how deep it went, at least 30 feet, with wooden supports holding back the earth. And at the bottom, something gleamed. Alara's breath caught. She knew that gleam. She'd seen it before, in her guardian's smithy, in books about ancient metals. Silver steel. It was the rarest ore in existence, formed only in places where catastrophic magical events had occurred. Weapons forged from silver steel could cut through almost anything. Armor made from it was nearly indestructible, and it was worth more than gold. But silver steel didn't just exist naturally. It formed in places where powerful magic had been unleashed. Battles between ancient wolves, sites of great curses, ground zero of magical catastrophes, which meant the Ashlands weren't a wasteland by accident. Something had happened here, something terrible enough to poison the land and create veins of silver steel in the process. And House Corvain had found it. That's what they were doing. They were mining silver steel using kidnapped exiles as slave labor, selling it for profit, or worse, arming themselves for something. Alara needed to tell someone, needed to get proof, well, what do we have here? She spun around. A guard stood behind her, sword drawn, grinning. "Lost, little exile?" Alara ran. She heard the guard shout behind her, heard more guards responding. Footsteps pounded after her. She dodged between buildings, heading for the palisade wall, but there were too many of them, and they knew the camp layout. She was cornered against a building, 5 guards closing in. "Nowhere to go," one of them said. Alara's hand went to her knife. It was a pathetic weapon against 5 armed soldiers, but she'd be damned if she went down without a fight. Then an arrow took the lead guard in the throat. The others whirled around. Dane was on top of a building, Oren beside him, both firing arrows as fast as they could knock them. "Run!" Dane shouted at Alara. She ran, crashed through the gap in the palisade, scrambled up the cliff face with guards screaming behind her. Arrows whistled past her head. One grazed her shoulder, burning hot. She made it to the top and kept running, not stopping until she couldn't hear pursuit anymore. Dane and Oren caught up to her a mile out, both breathing hard. "That," Dane panted, "was the stupidest thing I've ever seen anyone do." "I know," Alara gasped, "but I found out what they're doing." Better be worth almost dying for. "They're mining silver steel, and they're using exiles as slaves to do it." Dane's eyes widened. Oren swore softly. "If House Corvain is stockpiling silver steel," Alara continued, "they're either planning to sell it for a fortune or arm an army. Either way, it means they're preparing for something. Something big." "We need to tell the settlement," Dane said. "We need to tell the king," Alara corrected. Both men stared at her. "The king," Dane repeated flatly. "The one who banished you. That king. He doesn't know about this. I'd bet my life on it. House Corvain is operating behind his back, building power, maybe planning to overthrow him. And you think he'll care? About exiles being enslaved?" Alara thought about Ronan's face the night she rejected him, the hurt and fury in his eyes, the way he'd banished her without hesitation. "I don't know," she admitted, "but I have to try. Because if House Corvain succeeds, everyone suffers, not just exiles, everyone." They made it back to the settlement 4 days later, exhausted and half-starved. The council convened immediately. When Alara told them what she'd found, the response was mixed. Some wanted to march on the camp and free the prisoners. Others thought they should stay hidden, avoid drawing attention. "We can't fight House Corvain," Vex said. "We're a couple hundred exiles with improvised weapons. They have armies." "So we do nothing?" someone shouted. "We survive," Vex shot back. "Same as always." "I'm going to the capital," Alara said. "I'm going to tell the king what House Corvain is doing." The room went silent. "That's suicide," Kael said quietly. "Maybe, but it's the only play we have. He'll kill you the second you set foot in Arkhaven. You're banished. Coming back is treason. Then I'll die. But at least I'll die trying to stop this." Kael shook her head slowly. "You really think you can just walk into the palace and get an audience with the Alpha King?" "I think I know someone who can help me." That night, Alara sat alone in her small room, writing a letter by candlelight. The words came slowly, painfully, each one a small knife to the chest. She was writing to Mira, her guardian. The woman who'd raised her, taught her smithing, tried to protect her from a world that didn't care about low-born Omegas. Mira was still in the capital, still working in the lower quarter, and she'd know how to get a message to someone in the palace. Alara finished the letter, sealed it, and handed it to Dane the next morning. "Get this to Arkhaven," she said. "There's a courier station at the border. They'll take it the rest of the way." "And then what?" "Then I wait for a reply, and hope it comes before House Corvain realizes what I know." But hope, Alara was learning, was a dangerous thing in the Ashlands. 2 days later, the soldiers came. Not a small patrol this time. An army. They appeared at dawn, hundreds of them, surrounding the settlement in a coordinated assault. House Corvain's colors flew from every banner. Alara stood with the others as they watched the force assemble, her heart sinking. She'd been wrong. Lord Merrick hadn't backed off. He'd just been gathering strength, and now he was here to wipe them off the map. A rider approached under a white flag. He stopped at the settlement's edge and unrolled a scroll. "By order of Lord Merrick of House Corvain," he announced, "this settlement is hereby disbanded. All residents are to surrender immediately. Those who resist will be executed. Those who comply will be transported to labor camps for the duration of their sentences." Labor camps. The silver steel mines. They were going to enslave everyone. "What do we do?" someone whispered. Elara looked around at the people she'd come to know over these months. Kael, with her scarred hands and fierce loyalty. Dane, with his rough humor and good heart. Orin, with his quiet wisdom. All of them looking at her like she had answers. She didn't, but she had rage. "We fight," she said. The settlement exploded into motion. People scattered in every direction, some running for weapons, others grabbing children and heading for the hidden tunnels Orin had mapped out weeks ago. Kael was already at the forge, throwing open the weapons cache they'd been building. Dane was shouting orders, trying to organize anyone who could hold a blade. Elara stood frozen for 3 seconds, watching the chaos unfold. Then her wolf surged inside her chest, flooding her veins with adrenaline that tasted like copper and fire. "Barricade the main paths," she yelled. "Get the children into the tunnels, now!" Vex grabbed her arm. "We can't fight that many. We need to evacuate everyone." "They've got us surrounded. Where exactly are we supposed to evacuate to?" "Then we surrender. Maybe they'll enslave us," Elara cut in. "You heard him. Labor camps. That means the silver steel mines, and you know what we saw there." Vex's face went pale, but she nodded. "Then we buy time. Get as many people out through the tunnels as we can." The soldiers were advancing now, a slow coordinated march that was somehow more terrifying than a charge. Their armor gleamed even in the weak morning light. Their weapons looked sharp and well-maintained, professional military equipment, not the scavenged junk the exiles had. Lord Merrick rode at the center of the formation, tall and imperious on a black horse. Even from this distance, Elara could see the cold satisfaction on his face. He thought he'd already won. Kael appeared beside Elara, shoving a sword into her hands. "It's not pretty, but it'll kill." The blade was rough, the balance slightly off, but it was steel and it had an edge. Elara gripped it, feeling the weight settle in her palm. "How many fighters do we have?" she asked. "Maybe 60 who know which end of a weapon is which. Another 40 who will try anyway." Against hundreds of trained soldiers, the math was brutal. "We need to make them think twice," Elara said. "Hit them hard, make it costly, maybe they'll negotiate. Or maybe they'll just crush us faster. You got a better plan?" Kael's grin was sharp and humorless. "Not even a little bit." The first wave of soldiers reached the settlement's outer edge, a rough perimeter marked by stakes and wire they'd strung up weeks ago. It wouldn't stop anyone, but it would slow them down. "Now!" Dane shouted. Arrows flew from concealed positions. Not many, they didn't have enough bows, but enough to make the front line falter. 3 soldiers went down. Others raised shields, suddenly wary. Then someone threw the first fire pot. It arced through the air, trailing smoke, and shattered against a soldier's shield. Flames spread, and the man screamed, dropping his weapon to beat at the fire consuming his arm. "Keep throwing!" someone yelled. More fire pots flew. The exiles had made dozens of them. Clay jars filled with rendered fat and alcohol, stoppered with burning rags. Crude, but effective. The soldiers' advance stopped. Their neat formation broke as men tried to avoid the flames. Shouts of confusion rippled through their ranks. For maybe 30 seconds, Elara thought they might actually hold. Then Lord Merrick raised his hand, and everything changed. The air itself seemed to thicken. Elara felt it like pressure against her skull, wrong and invasive and tasting of rot. Her wolf recoiled, whimpering, magic, dark magic. 3 soldiers in the back ranks began to change. Their bodies twisted, bones cracking and reforming, fur erupted from skin, mouths elongated into muzzles filled with teeth like knives. But these weren't normal wolves. They were too big, too wrong. Their eyes glowed red, foam dripped from their jaws. And when they howled, the sound made Elara's teeth ache. "What the hell?" Kael breathed. The transformed soldiers charged. They moved faster than any wolf should, crashing through the barricades like they were made of paper. One of them caught an exile who'd been manning a firepot and tore him apart before he could scream. "Fall back!" Dane roared. "Everyone back to the forge!" The retreat was chaos. People ran, tripped, were trampled. The monsters, because that's what they were, not wolves but something corrupted, tore through the fleeing exiles like wolves through sheep. Elara found herself running beside Kael, both of them pulling a woman who'd fallen and twisted her ankle. Behind them, she heard screaming, heard the wet sounds of tearing flesh. They made it to the forge and slammed the heavy doors shut. Dane and 3 others braced them with iron bars. "That won't hold long," Oren said. He was pale, bleeding from a cut across his forehead. "Doesn't need to hold long," Kyle said. "Just needs to hold until everyone's in the tunnels." But even as she said it, something crashed against the door hard enough to crack the wood. Then again. The iron bars groaned. "How many got out?" Elara asked. "Maybe half," Vex said. She was doing a head count of the people crowded into the forge. "The rest are either dead or scattered." Another impact. The door splintered. Through the gap, Elara saw red eyes and slavering jaws. "We need to run," someone sobbed. "We need to—" The door exploded inward. 2 of the corrupted wolves forced their way through, their bodies too large for the opening. They twisted and pushed, claws gouging the doorframe, until they were inside. The forge erupted in screaming. People scrambled away, crushing against the back wall. Dane thrust his sword at the nearest monster, but it batted the blade aside like it was nothing. Elara moved without thinking. She grabbed a pair of tongs from the forge, gripped a white-hot piece of metal from the coals, and hurled it at the wolf's face. The metal struck home. The creature shrieked, a sound that was half howl, half human scream, and staggered back. "The tunnel!" Kale was shouting. "Get to the tunnel!" She'd opened a hidden panel in the floor, revealing a narrow shaft leading down into darkness. People were already climbing in, disappearing into the earth, but the corrupted wolves were recovering, and more soldiers were pouring through the broken door now, real soldiers with real weapons. "Go!" Elara shoved people toward the tunnel opening. "Move!" Kale grabbed her arm. "You too. I'll hold them." "Like hell. Someone has to stay and collapse the entrance after everyone's through, otherwise they'll just follow us down." "Then You're Omega," Kyle cut in. "You're the only one who might be able to negotiate with the king. I'm just a smith with a bad attitude." She smiled, quick and fierce. "Now get out of here before I throw you down that hole myself." Elara wanted to argue, wanted to refuse. But Kyle was right, and they both knew it. She descended into the tunnel, the last one through. Above her, she heard Kyle laughing, actually laughing, as she faced down the monsters and soldiers. Then an explosion shook the earth, and the tunnel entrance collapsed in a roar of falling stone. Darkness swallowed everything. Tamped. They stumbled through the tunnels for what felt like hours, navigating by touch and the occasional torch someone had thought to grab. The air was stale and close. Water dripped from the ceiling. Twice they had to squeeze through gaps so narrow Elara thought her ribs would crack. When they finally emerged, it was in a small canyon miles from the settlement. Maybe 40 people had made it out. 40 out of over 200. Elara sat on a rock and tried not to think about Kyle's smile, tried not to hear the echoes of screaming, tried not to calculate how many people she'd gotten killed by making them fight instead of surrender. "What now?" Vex asked. She looked shell-shocked, covered in ash and blood that might not have been hers. "Now we survive," Dane said, but his voice was hollow. "They'll hunt us," Oren added quietly. "Lord Merrick won't let this go. He'll send trackers." "Then we split up," Elara said. "Small groups, harder to track, head for different territories." "And you?" Vex asked. Elara stood up. Her whole body hurt, but she forced herself to stand straight. "I'm going to Arkhaven." "That's suicide." "Everything's suicide at this point." Elara looked at the bedraggled survivors. "But I'm not letting Kyle's sacrifice be for nothing. House Corvain is using dark magic to create those things. They're enslaving people. They're building an army. Someone has to tell the king, and I'm the only one who has even a chance of getting close enough." "Because you were his rejected mate?" Dane's laugh was bitter. "That's more likely to get you executed than heard." "Maybe, but I have to try." She left at first light, traveling alone because no one else was stupid enough to come with her. She carried minimal supplies, a water skin, some dried meat, the rough sword Kyle had given her. Everything else had been lost in the attack. The journey back to Arkhaven took 6 days. 6 days of walking through increasingly less hostile terrain as she left the Ashlands behind. 6 days of watching the world transform from wasteland to borderlands to cultivated farmland. 6 days of planning what she'd say if she actually managed to get an audience with Ronan before his guards killed her. She reached the capital at dusk on the 7th day. The The city sprawled before her, all stone walls and tiled roofs and spiraling towers that caught the dying light. She'd lived here once, in the lower quarter where the air smelled like forge smoke and unwashed bodies. Now she was looking at it from the outside, and it felt like another world. Alara waited until full dark, then approached the walls at their weakest point, the section near the tanneries, where the guards were fewer and lazier because no one wanted to stand watch next to the stench. She climbed the wall using a combination of handholds and sheer desperation. Her shoulder, the one grazed by an arrow at the mining camp, screamed in protest, but she made it over, dropping into an alley that smelled like piss and rotting leather. Welcome home. She kept to the shadows, moving through the lower quarter like a ghost. Everything was familiar, the narrow streets, the leaning buildings, the sounds of people living their lives behind thin walls. But she couldn't stop, couldn't risk being recognized. She needed to reach Mira's smithy. If anyone could help her get into the palace, it was her guardian. The smithy was exactly where she'd left it, tucked between a bakery and a cordwainer's shop. The forge was dark now, banked for the night, but light showed through the cracks in the shutters of the living quarters above. Alara circled to the back and climbed the outside stairs, each step creaking loud enough to wake the dead. She knocked on the door. 3 quick raps, pause, 2 more. The old signal from when she was a child and coming home late from errands. For a long moment, nothing. Then the door cracked open. Mira stood there, older and grayer than Alara remembered. Her face went through several expressions in quick succession: shock, disbelief, fear, and finally something that might have been joy. Alara? Can I come in? Mira yanked her inside and slammed the door, throwing the bolt. Are you insane? You're banished. If anyone sees you... I know. I'm sorry, but I need your help. Mira stared at her for a long moment. Then she pulled Alara into a crushing hug that smelled like coal dust and home. I thought you were dead, Mira whispered. Everyone said no one survives the ashlands. I almost didn't, Alara pulled back. But I found something the king needs to know about. She told Mira everything. The raids, the silver steel mine, the enslaved exiles, the corrupted wolves and dark magic, Lord Merrick and House Corvain's secret army. Mira listened, her face growing darker with every word. You're saying House Corvain is building a force to overthrow the king, she said when Alara finished. I don't know if they're planning a coup or just consolidating power. But yes, that's what it looks like. And you want me to help you get into the palace to tell him this? Yes. Even though he banished you, even though seeing you again might drive him into a rage, even though you broke a sacred bond and humiliated him in front of the entire court. Alara flinched. Put like that, it sounded even more hopeless. Yes. Mira was quiet for a long time. Then she sighed. There's something you need to know about why the bond formed in the first place. What do you mean? I mean, the blood moon ceremony didn't choose you randomly. Fate doesn't work that way. Mira crossed to a small chest in the corner and pulled out a leather-bound journal. Your mother left this for you. I was supposed to give it to you when you turned 21, but... She hesitated. After you were exiled, I didn't think it would matter anymore. Alara took the journal with shaking hands. The leather was old, cracked. The pages inside were covered in handwriting she didn't recognize. Who was my mother? She asked quietly. Read it, Mira said. Then decide if you still want to see the king. Alara opened the journal. The first entry was dated 26 years ago. The handwriting was elegant, educated, not what she'd expected from a woman who'd died in the lower quarter. My daughter will be born tomorrow. The physicians say it will be a difficult birth, and I am afraid. Not for myself, but for her. Because she will carry a burden she did not choose. She will be the last of our line, and that makes her both precious and dangerous. Alara's hands trembled. She turned the page. I am Lyanna Thorne, daughter of House Corvain. Yes, that House Corvain, the same family that now rules half the kingdom's wealth. But I'm not like them. I never was. The words blurred. Alara forced herself to focus, to keep reading. 27 years ago, my family made a deal with something they should never have touched. Dark magic, older than the kingdom itself. They wanted power, immortality, control over the throne. The price was a blood sacrifice from the royal line. They planned to use the Alpha King's mate. Whoever he bonded with would become a vessel for the corruption, a doorway for the darkness to enter the kingdom. The curse was woven into our bloodline specifically. Any daughter of House Corvain who bonded with a veil would activate it. I discovered their plan. I tried to stop them. They called me a traitor and attempted to kill me. I escaped with nothing but my life and went into hiding in the lower quarter. But the curse remained. I knew if I ever bonded with anyone, if I ever let my wolf rise fully, the corruption would find me. So I had my wolf bound, made myself weak, almost human, met a good man who didn't care about bloodlines or power. We had 3 years together before he died in a building collapse. 3 years and 1 daughter. Elara, if you're reading this, you need to know you are House Corvain's true heir, not the bastards who wear the name now. They are usurpers, the children of my uncle who stole the title after my father died. You are also cursed. The same curse that would have activated in me lives in you. If you bond with an alpha of House Vale, the darkness will use you. It will corrupt you both. It will tear the kingdom apart. I am so sorry. I wish I could have given you a different life, but all I can give you is this warning. Stay away from the throne. Stay away from the Alpha King. Live quietly, live safely, and maybe the curse will die with you. I love you. I'm sorry. The journal slipped from Alara's hands and hit the floor with a sound like thunder. She was House Corvain, the true heir. Everything she thought she knew about herself was a lie. How long have you known? She whispered. Mira's face was pained. Your mother told me before she died, made me promise to keep you safe, keep you hidden. I bound your wolf when you were a child, weakened it so the curse wouldn't sense you, raised you as a blacksmith's apprentice so you'd never come to the nobility's attention. But the bond formed anyway. Because you're the legitimate heir, blood calls to blood. The curse recognized you even with your wolf bound. Mira stepped closer. That's why you rejected him. You found out about the curse somehow. I found a journal in the palace archives. It described the curse, but not whose bloodline carried it. So you saved him. You took exile, gave up everything, to prevent the curse from activating. Alara nodded, not trusting herself to speak. Except the curse isn't the only danger anymore, Mira continued. House Corvain, the false branch, the ones who stole the title. They're making their move. And if they succeed, if they take control of the kingdom, the curse won't matter because there won't be a kingdom left to save. Alara picked up the journal, holding it like it might explode. So what do I do? You're the true heir of House Corvain. That means you have a legal claim to the title. If you challenge them, if you expose them, they'll kill me before I can speak 3 words. Probably, Mira smiled grimly. But you've always been stubborn, and you've survived this long. Alara thought about Kael, laughing as she faced down monsters. Thought about the exiles who'd fought and died trying to defend their homes. Thought about Ronan standing in the ceremonial circle, bleeding and betrayed. She'd run from this, from her heritage, from the curse, from the responsibility of being someone who mattered. But running hadn't saved anyone. It had just delayed the inevitable. I need to get into the palace, she said. Can you help me or not? Mira crossed to a cabinet and pulled out a bundle wrapped in oilcloth. I was hoping you'd say that. She unwrapped it, revealing a dress, simple but well made, the kind a merchant's daughter might wear. Put this on. I know someone who works in the palace kitchens. She owes me a favor. A favor big enough to risk her life for? I saved her daughter from a fever that should have killed her, so yes. Alara changed into the dress, feeling strange in fabric that wasn't torn or stained with ash. Mira pinned her hair back, hiding the worst of the tangles, and applied some kind of powder to her face to cover the bruises and cuts. You look almost respectable, Mira said. Try not to ruin it before you get inside. They left through the back entrance, moving through the lower quarters maze of alleys. Mira led her to a small house near the palace's service entrance. An older woman answered the door, took one look at Alara, and sighed. This is the favor? She asked Mira. This is the favor. The girl's banished. Everyone knows her face. She needs to get inside, just to the servant corridors. The woman, her name was Bess, looked at Alara for a long moment. Why? Because if I don't, House Corvain is going to destroy the kingdom, Alara said. And a lot of people are going to die. Bess snorted. Dramatic. But I suppose that's the only reason someone would be stupid enough to come back after exile. She stepped aside. Fine. But if you get caught, I don't know you. Fair enough. Bess led them through the pre-dawn streets to the palace's kitchen entrance. The guards there were half asleep, barely glancing at the workers streaming in for the day shift. Alara pulled a scarf over her hair and kept her head down. They made it inside without challenge. The palace kitchens were chaos, cooks shouting orders, scullery maids hauling water, ovens belching heat and smoke. Bess pulled Alara through the mess and into a narrow corridor that led deeper into the palace. "This goes to the servant quarters," she said. "From there you can access most of the palace if you know the routes. But if anyone asks, you're a new laundry maid." "Thank you," Alara said. "Don't thank me. Just don't get caught." Bess disappeared back into the kitchens. Alara stood alone in the corridor, her heart hammering. She was inside the palace, the place she'd sworn never to return to, the place where she'd destroyed her life 4 months ago. Now she just had to figure out how to get an audience with the Alpha King before his guards discovered her and threw her in a dungeon. Or worse. She moved through the servant corridors, trying to look purposeful. Twice she passed other servants, but they barely glanced at her. Everyone was too busy with their own tasks to care about one more unremarkable maid. But she couldn't reach Ronan this way. He'd be in the royal quarters, surrounded by guards and advisors. She needed a better plan. Then she heard voices ahead, nobles by the sound of them. She pressed herself against the wall, listening. Ridiculous that he's still refusing to marry. It's been months since the Omega rejected him. Pride, probably. He's humiliated. Well, he needs to get over it. House Corvain has offered their daughter twice now, and he keeps declining. Alara's blood went cold. House Corvain was trying to marry into the throne. Of course they were. That's how they'd activate the curse. Through a different bloodline, a different bride. I heard Lady Seraphine is lovely, though, beautiful, accomplished, from one of the best families. And the king doesn't care. He barely attends court anymore, just sits in that council chamber brooding. Can you blame him? A rejected bond is supposed to be impossible. The fact that it happened at all, the voices faded as the nobles moved away. Alara's mind raced. Ronan was refusing to marry, refusing House Corvain's offers. That meant he wasn't completely under their control yet, but he was isolated, brooding, probably drowning in the pain of the broken bond while House Corvain circled like vultures. She had to reach him, had to warn him. The council chamber, that's where he was spending his time. Alara navigated through the servant passages, following half-remembered routes from the 3 weeks she'd spent in the palace before the ceremony. The passages were a maze, but she had explored them extensively back then, too restless and anxious to sit still. She found a passage that led to a balcony overlooking the main council chamber. She climbed up, careful not to make noise, and peered through the decorative screen that hid the balcony from view. Ronan sat alone at the massive council table, staring at papers spread before him. He looked wrong. Thinner than she remembered, shadows under his eyes. His hair was unkempt, like he'd been running his hands through it for hours. The broken bond was destroying him, slowly but visibly. Guilt crashed over Alara like a wave. She'd done this to him. She'd saved him from the curse, yes, but she'd broken him in the process. She was about to call out when the council chamber doors opened. Lord Merrick entered, along with 2 other nobles Alara didn't recognize. "Your Majesty," Merrick said smoothly, "I apologize for the intrusion, but there are matters that require your attention." Ronan didn't look up. "What matters?" "The Ashlands, sire. There was an incident." Now Ronan's head lifted. "What kind of incident?" "A group of exiles attacked a royal patrol, killed 3 soldiers, wounded several more. We were forced to respond with appropriate force." Alara's hands clenched on the balcony railing. Liar. They'd attacked the settlement first. "How many casualties?" Ronan asked. "Among the exiles?" "Most of them. Perhaps 200 dead. The survivors scattered." Ronan's face remained impassive. "And our losses?" "Minimal, sire. A few wounded. Nothing serious." "Good." Ronan turned back to his papers. "Is that all?" "Actually, sire, there's one more thing." Lord Merrick's smile was oily. "The wedding." "I already told you I'm not interested in marrying your daughter." "With respect, sire, the kingdom needs an heir. You need a mate. Lady Seraphine is an excellent match." "I said no." "But sire..." No! Ronan's fist slammed on the table hard enough to make the papers jump. I don't care how excellent a match she is. I don't care about alliances or heirs or any of it. Get out! Lord Merrick's expression flickered, just for a second, with something dark and angry. Then the smooth mask returned. Of course, sire. As you wish. He bowed and retreated, the other nobles following. As soon as they were gone, Ronan slumped in his chair. He looked exhausted, defeated. And Alara realized she couldn't stay hidden anymore. She stood up, her legs shaking, and called down to him. They're lying to you. Ronan surged to his feet, his chair clattering backward. His eyes scanned the room wildly before landing on the balcony. On her. For 3 heartbeats, neither of them moved. Neither of them breathed. Then Ronan's voice, rough and disbelieving. Alara? Alara climbed down from the balcony before she could lose her nerve. Her hands found the carved stone handhold she'd used months ago when exploring the palace, muscle memory guiding her even though her whole body was shaking. When her feet hit the council chamber floor, Ronan was standing 10 feet away, staring at her like she was a ghost. You're supposed to be in the Ashlands, he said. His voice was flat, controlled, but she could hear the razor edge underneath. I was. I came back. That's treason. I know. I could have you executed. I know that too. Ronan's jaw clenched. For a long moment he just looked at her, really looked, taking in the bruises barely hidden by powder, the too thin frame under the borrowed dress, the way she held herself like someone who'd learned to expect violence. You look like hell, he said finally. You don't look much better. Something that might have been a laugh tried to escape his throat. It came out more like a cough. 4 months. You've been gone 4 months, and now you just, what? Climb out of a servant passage and expect me to listen to whatever brought you back? Lord Merrick lied to you, Alara said, about the Ashlands, about the attack. He said exiles killed royal soldiers. His soldiers attacked us first. We were just trying to survive. Ronan's expression hardened. Of course you'd say that. It's the truth. They've been raiding the settlements for months, stealing supplies, kidnapping people. They told us it was by your order. I gave no such order. I know, that's why I'm here. Ronan moved then, crossing the space between them in 3 long strides. He stopped close enough that Alara could feel the heat radiating off him, could smell pine and steel and something wild that made her wolf whimper with longing. Give me one reason, he said quietly, why I should believe anything you say. You rejected me, humiliated me, walked away like our bond meant nothing. The bond meant everything, Alara said. That's why I had to reject it. That makes no sense. It does if you know about the curse. Ronan went very still. What curse? So Alara told him. Not everything, not yet, but enough. She told him about the journal she'd found in the archives, about the curse laid on House Corvain generations ago, about how any daughter of that bloodline who bonded with a veil would become a vessel for dark corruption. I rejected you to save you, she finished, to save the kingdom. I thought if I walked away the curse couldn't activate. Ronan's face had gone pale. House Corvain. You're saying House Corvain carries a curse designed to corrupt the throne? Yes. And you knew this before the ceremony. 3 weeks before. So you came to the ceremony knowing you'd reject me? Yes. And you never thought to tell me? To warn me? Alara flinched. I couldn't risk it. If anyone found out, if House Corvain discovered I knew, they would have killed me and found another way to activate the curse. So instead you made me look like a fool in front of the entire court. I made you hate me. I thought that would be enough to keep you safe. Ronan turned away, running a hand through his already disheveled hair. This is insane. You're saying one of the kingdom's most powerful houses has been planning to corrupt the throne for generations? Not the whole house. A branch of it. Alara pulled out her mother's journal, the one she'd tucked into her dress before leaving Mira's. The current Lord Corvain, Merrick's father, he's a usurper. He stole the title after the legitimate heir disappeared. And you know this how? Because I'm the legitimate heir. The words hung in the air like a blade. Ronan turned back to her slowly. What? My mother was Lyanna Corvain, daughter of the true Lord Corvain. She fled when her family tried to use her to activate the curse, went into hiding in the lower quarter. She had me there. Died when I was 6. Elara held out the journal. It's all in here. Her account of what happened, why she ran, what the curse does. Ronan took the journal like it might burn him. He opened it, scanned the first few pages. His expression shifted from skepticism to shock to cold fury. If this is true, he said, then House Corvain has been operating under false pretenses for over 20 years. Everything they've built, every alliance they've made, it's all based on a stolen title. It's true. And it gets worse. Elara told him about the silver steel mine, the enslaved exiles, the corrupted wolves created through dark magic, Lord Merrick's secret army. They're not just planning to corrupt the throne, she said. They're planning to take it by force if necessary. The mine gives them resources. The dark magic gives them weapons. And they've been systematically eliminating anyone who might challenge them. The raids, Ronan said slowly, they weren't authorized. They were Merrick building his power base in secret. Yes. And the 200 dead he just reported to me were people trying to defend their homes from his soldiers. Ronan's hands clenched around the journal hard enough to crumple the pages. He stood in this room an hour ago and lied to my face. He's been lying to you for months, maybe years. Why didn't anyone tell me? Why didn't my scouts report? He stopped. Unless they did report, and someone intercepted the messages. Do you have people in the court you trust absolutely? Ronan was quiet for a long moment. I don't know anymore. The admission seemed to cost him. Elara could see it in the way his shoulders sagged, the way his grip on the journal loosened. How many? She asked softly. How many people has House Corvain bought or intimidated? I don't know. But Merrick has been pushing for more power in the council for the last year, suggesting new appointments, recommending people for positions. Ronan's jaw tightened. I thought he was just being ambitious. I didn't realize he was building a network. He's been very careful, very patient. Not careful enough, apparently, if you figured it out. I got lucky, and I had incentive to dig deeper than most people. Ronan looked at her then, really looked, and something in his expression cracked. You've been in the Ashlands this whole time, surviving out there while I... He cut himself off. Why did you come back? You could have stayed hidden, stayed safe. Because Merrick's not going to stop with the exiles. Because people died trying to fight back. And I won't let their deaths be for nothing. And because... Elara hesitated. Because you deserve to know the truth. The truth, Ronan repeated. The truth is that my kingdom is being infiltrated by a corrupt house using dark magic. The truth is that my mate, former mate, is apparently the rightful heir to that house. The truth is that I don't know who I can trust anymore. He set the journal down on the council table. What do you want me to do with all this, Elara? Expose them. Strip Merrick of his false title. Shut down the mine. Arrest everyone involved. With what evidence? Your word? A journal that could be forged? I can take you to the mine, show you the silver steel, the enslaved workers, the corrupted wolves. And how long would that take? How many days for us to travel there and back? Days that Merrick would use to consolidate power, eliminate witnesses, prepare for war. Elara hadn't thought of that. Then what do you suggest? I suggest, a new voice said from the doorway, that you both stop talking and start running. They spun around. Mira stood there, breathing hard, her face pale. How did you... Elara started. Followed you. Good thing I did. Mira glanced at Ronan. Your Majesty, you need to leave the palace. Now. Excuse me? Lord Merrick knows she's here. One of the kitchen staff saw her, recognized her, reported it. He's gathering guards right now. Ronan's hand went to the sword at his hip. Let him come. I'm the king. He can't touch me. He can if he's got half the palace guard on his payroll, Mira shot back, which, judging by the number of soldiers heading this way, he does. As if on cue, they heard boots in the corridor outside. Many boots. Ronan swore. The servant passages? Already being searched, Mira said. Then we fight our way out. There are too many of them. I'm not running from a traitor in my own palace. You will if you want to live long enough to stop him, Elara said. She grabbed Ronan's arm. Please, trust me. For 3 heartbeats, he didn't move. Then he nodded once, sharp and decisive. Where do we go? Alara looked at Mira. Mira looked toward the council chamber's far wall, the one with the massive tapestry depicting some ancient battle. Behind there, Mira said, there's an old escape route, built during the last war in case the palace was ever sieged. How do you know that? Ronan asked. Your grandfather told me when I was doing metalwork for the palace years ago. They ran to the tapestry. Ronan tore it down, revealing a section of wall that looked identical to the rest, except for a small indentation at shoulder height. Here, Alara said, recognizing the mechanism from similar ones she'd seen in smithwork. She pressed it, twisted, and a section of wall swung inward. Darkness yawned beyond. The council chamber doors crashed open. Guards poured in, at least 20 of them. And at the front, Lord Merrick himself, his face twisted with rage. Stop them, he shouted. Ronan shoved Alara and Mira through the opening. He followed, slamming the door shut just as the first guard reached it. They heard fists pounding on stone, muffled shouts. That won't hold long, Ronan said. He found a metal bar on the inside of the door and dropped it into place. How long is this passage? No idea, Mira admitted. Never actually used it. Fantastic. They stumbled forward into darkness. Alara's hands found the wall, using it to guide her. The passage sloped downward, the air growing colder and damper. Behind them, something crashed, the sound of the secret door being breached. Run, Ronan said. They ran. The passage seemed to go on forever, twisting and turning, sometimes branching. They took turns at random, hoping to lose their pursuers in the maze. Alara's lungs burned. Her legs screamed, but she pushed harder because stopping meant death. Finally, the passage ended at a heavy wooden door. Ronan threw his weight against it, and it burst open, spilling them out into a stable. They were in a stable on the palace grounds, hay and horse dung thick in the air. Where are we? Alara gasped. Ronan looked around, getting his bearings. South Courtyard, near the training grounds. Can we get to the main gates? Not without being seen, he thought fast. But we can get to the old watchtower on the east wall. It's been abandoned for years. We can hide there until what? Mira cut in. Until Merrick declares you a traitor and takes the throne for himself? He can't do that. The council will do whatever he tells them if he's got enough swords to back it up. Ronan's face went hard. Then we need to get out of the city, gather forces, come back with an army. Your army, Alara said quietly, might not be yours anymore. The words hung heavy. Ronan looked at her, and for the first time since she'd rejected him, she saw fear in his eyes. Not for himself, for the kingdom. What do we do? He asked. And the fact that he was asking her, the exiled Omega, the rejected mate, said everything about how desperate things had become. We need proof, Alara said. Undeniable proof of what Merrick is doing. The mine is 4 days away, too far, but an idea struck her. The corrupted wolves, he must be creating them somewhere close, if he was able to deploy them to the Ashlands that quickly. Ronan's eyes widened. The old garrison, east of the city, about 3 hours' ride. It's been decommissioned for years, but the buildings are still standing. That would be perfect for secret experiments. If we can get there, document what they're doing, bring back proof, then the council has to listen, Mira finished. Even the ones Merrick bought won't be able to ignore dark magic being used on kingdom soil. Ronan nodded slowly. We need horses and weapons. I can get those, Mira said. I know a merchant in the lower quarter who owes me favors, but you two need to get out of the palace grounds before Merrick locks everything down. How? Mira grabbed a couple of stable blankets and threw them at Ronan and Alara. Cover yourselves. Walk like you belong here. And for the love of everything, don't make eye contact with anyone. It was a terrible plan, but it was the only plan they had. They wrapped themselves in the horse-smelling blankets and walked out of the stable like they had every right to be there. The courtyard was busy with morning activity, servants running errands, guards changing shifts, nobles heading to their various appointments. No one looked twice at 2 blanket-wrapped figures moving through the chaos. They made it to a side gate, one used mainly for supply carts. The guard there was old, half asleep. He waved them through without even asking for identification. Then they were outside the palace walls, in the maze of streets that made up the lower quarter. Alara felt like she could breathe for the first time since entering the council chamber. Mira led them to a narrow shop wedged between a butcher and a clothier. The sign above the door read, "Finn's Goods, fair prices, no questions." Inside, a stocky man with a scarred face looked up from a ledger. His eyes widened when he saw Mira. "You're calling in your favor?" he asked. "All of it? Must be serious. Life or death?" Finn looked at Ronan and Alara, taking in the blankets and the desperate look in their eyes. "Right. What do you need?" 3 horses, riding tack, weapons, swords, knives, anything that'll work in a fight. Food for 3 days, and we need it in the next 10 minutes. Finn whistled low. "That's a big favor." "I know. This got anything to do with the commotion up at the palace? Guards running everywhere? Nobles in a panic?" "Might." Finn grinned. "Well, I never liked those palace types anyway. Give me 15 minutes. He was true to his word. 15 minutes later, they had 3 horses saddled and loaded with supplies, and Alara was strapping on a sword that actually felt balanced and deadly. Ronan pulled on a cloak, hiding his face. "If anyone asks, you never saw us." "Saw who?" Finn said innocently. They rode out through the east gate, just 3 more travelers leaving the city. The guards at the gate were distracted by some commotion on the walls, probably Merrick's men searching for them. The city fell away behind them. Fields and forest opened up ahead. Alara felt the tension in her shoulders ease slightly. They'd made it out. They were alive. But this was just the beginning. They rode hard for 3 hours, pushing the horses as much as they dared. The landscape gradually shifted from farmland to wilder country. The old garrison sat in a valley between 2 hills, its stone walls crumbling but intact. They approached carefully, leaving the horses tied in a grove of trees about a quarter-mile out. "Stay low," Ronan whispered. "If there are guards." "There," Alara breathed, pointing. 2 men stood at the garrison's entrance. They wore armor that bore House Corvain's colors, and they looked alert, professional. "So it's being used," Mira said. "Question is for what?" Ronan said. They circled the garrison, looking for another way in. On the north side, they found a section of wall that had partially collapsed, leaving a gap just wide enough to squeeze through. Inside the garrison was a mess of crumbling buildings and overgrown courtyards. But in the center, one building stood out, newly repaired with fresh timber shoring up the roof and windows that had been recently replaced. And from inside they heard screaming. Not human screaming. Something worse, the howls of animals in agony, mixed with sounds that made Alara's wolf recoil in horror. "What the hell is that?" Mira whispered. Ronan's face was grim. "Let's find out." They crept closer to the building. Through a cracked window, Alara could see inside. It was a workshop, but for nightmares. Cages lined the walls, each holding a wolf in various stages of transformation. Some were still mostly normal, just larger and more aggressive. Others were twisted things, fur matted with blood, eyes glowing red, foam dripping from elongated jaws. And in the center of the room, a man in robes was working over a wolf strapped to a table. He was chanting, his hands glowing with sickly green light. The wolf on the table was convulsing, its body warping, bones breaking and reforming. "That's how they make them," Alara breathed. "They're forcing transformations through dark magic." Ronan's hand was on his sword hilt, knuckles white. "This is an abomination." "This is proof," Mira said. She pulled out a small journal from her pack. "I'm going to sketch this. Document everything." While Mira worked, Alara counted the cages. At least 20 wolves in various stages of corruption, 20 weapons waiting to be deployed. "How many has he already sent out?" she wondered aloud. "Too many," Ronan said darkly. They watched for another 10 minutes, letting Mira capture as much detail as possible. The mage finished his work on the wolf, which was now a twitching, growling monster, and moved to another cage. "We've seen enough," Ronan said. "Let's us." A bell clanged somewhere in the garrison. The alarm. "They found the horses," Mira said. They ran. Guards poured into the courtyard from every direction. Alara drew her sword, Ronan beside her, Mira behind them clutching her journal. "There," Someone shouted. "The king's with them!" The guards hesitated for just a second. Killing the king was still a line most weren't willing to cross. That second was enough. Ronan cut down the nearest guard and grabbed his sword arm as he fell, twisting to throw the man into two others. Alara ducked a wild swing and drove her blade up under a guard's ribs. He went down choking. They fought their way toward the collapsed wall, step by brutal step. Alara's arms burned. Blood slicked her hands, some of it hers, most of it not. They made it through the gap with guards right behind them, sprinted for the horses, mounted up, and rode like hell itself was chasing them. Arrows whistled past. One caught Mira's shoulder and she gasped but stayed in the saddle. Then they were in the trees, the forest swallowing them, and the pursuit fell behind. They didn't stop riding until dusk, when the horses were lathered and shaking with exhaustion. They made camp in a small clearing, no fire, eating cold rations and trying to catch their breath. Alara checked Mira's wound. The arrow had gone clean through, missing anything vital, but it needed cleaning and binding. "You're getting good at field medicine," Mira said through gritted teeth as Alara worked. "I've had practice." When Mira's shoulder was bandaged, they sat in silence for a moment. Then Ronan spoke. "We have proof now. Documented evidence of dark magic being used to create weapons." "Will it be enough?" Alara asked. "It has to be. Tomorrow we ride for the northern garrison. I have an old friend there, Commander Thane. He served with my father. If anyone's still loyal, it's him." "And if he's not?" Ronan's smile was sharp. "Then we improvise." They took turns on watch that night. When it was Alara's turn, she sat with her back against a tree, sword across her knees, and watched Ronan sleep. He looked younger in sleep, the hard lines of command smoothing out. She could see traces of the man he might have been if he hadn't been born to carry a crown. She'd broken him to save him, and now she was dragging him into a war that might kill them both. Some salvation. Her shift ended. She woke Ronan gently, their fingers brushing as she passed him the sword. For just a second, the bond flared between them, broken but not dead, still there like a phantom limb. Ronan felt it too. She saw it in the way his breath caught, the way his eyes met hers in the darkness. "Alara." "Get some sleep," she said quietly. "We have a long ride tomorrow." She lay down before he could say whatever was in his eyes, before she could say the things building in her own chest. They rode out at dawn, heading north. The northern garrison was 2 days away. 2 days to prepare, to plan, to hope that this gamble would pay off. On the second day, they saw smoke on the horizon. They rode toward it, dread building with every mile. The smoke was coming from where the garrison should be. When they crested the hill overlooking it, Alara's stomach dropped. The garrison was burning, bodies littered the ground, House Corvain's banners flew from the walls. "No," Ronan breathed. They were too late. Merrick had already moved against the king's loyal forces. They were about to turn back when a figure stumbled out of the tree line. A soldier, armor scorched and dented, bleeding from a dozen wounds. Ronan dismounted and caught the man before he fell. "Commander Thane?" Ronan asked. The soldier shook his head weakly. "Dead. They killed him first, came at dawn. We didn't stand a chance." "How many survived?" "Maybe 20. Scattered in the forest. I was trying to find them, warn them." He coughed, blood flecking his lips. "Your Majesty, you need to run. Merrick's declared you compromised by dark magic. Says you're unfit to rule. Half the nobility believes him." "How is that possible?" "He's got proof. Witnesses. Says you've been acting strange for months, making irrational decisions. They're calling an emergency council session tomorrow to vote on removing you from power." Ronan looked like he'd been punched. "They can't do that. I'm the Alpha King." "They can if enough council members agree you're a danger to the kingdom." Alara felt the bottom drop out of her world. Merrick had outmaneuvered them. While they'd been gathering proof, he'd been building a case, and now he was moving to legally seize power before they could expose him. The soldier grabbed Ronan's arm. "You need allies, real ones, people who can't be bought." "I don't know who that is anymore." "Then find them." The soldier's grip loosened. "Find them before tomorrow, or the kingdom falls." He died before Ronan could ask more questions. They buried him quickly, using rocks because they didn't have time to dig. Then they stood over the rough grave, trying to figure out what the hell to do next. "The council session is tomorrow," Mira said. "In Arkhaven. We'd have to ride through the night to make it in time." Even if we do, Alara said, what then? We walk into a room full of people Merrick controls and try to convince them he's the real traitor? We have evidence, Ronan said. Mira's sketches will be dismissed as forgeries. He'll say we made them up to discredit him. Ronan's jaw worked. Then what do you suggest? Alara thought about the council chamber, about politics and proof and the way power really worked in kingdoms. And then she thought about something Kael had said back in the Ashlands, right before she'd sacrificed herself. Someone has to stay and collapse the entrance, otherwise they'll just follow us. Sometimes you had to make a sacrifice. Make a move so bold, so undeniable, that it changed the entire game. I have an idea, Alara said slowly. But you're going to hate it. I'm already listening. Tomorrow you walk into that council session, not as a king defending himself, as a king making an accusation. Against Merrick. Yes, that's what I planned. No, against me. Ronan stared at her. What? You accuse me of being the real traitor, of being House Corvain's agent, of corrupting you through the bond before I rejected it. The plan was forming as she spoke, pieces clicking into place. You say I came back to finish the job, to destroy you from within. That's insane. It's brilliant, Mira said quietly. If Ronan accuses you publicly, Merrick can't claim Ronan's compromised. It proves he's acting rationally, protecting the kingdom. Exactly, Alara said. And if I'm there, in chains, as proof of his vigilance, then the council has to listen to him, Ronan finished. His face was pale. You'd be putting yourself at their mercy. Yes, they could execute you. Probably will, actually. Then no, absolutely not. It's the only way. I won't use you as bait. You're not using me. I'm volunteering. Alara met his eyes. I rejected you to save you from a curse. Let me do this to save you from a coup. Alara, please, trust me one more time. Ronan looked like every word was cutting him, but slowly he nodded. One condition, he said. You don't go in there unarmed. We give you a way out. What kind of way out? Ronan turned to Mira. You said you know people in the palace, people who owe you favors. A few. How many could you get into the council chamber tomorrow? As servants, guards, witnesses? Mira's eyes widened. Maybe 10. 15 if I call in every marker I have. Do it. Position them throughout the room. If things go wrong, when things go wrong, they move on my signal. And do what? Whatever it takes to get Alara out alive. They spent the rest of the day planning. Mira rode back to the city to gather her people while Ronan and Alara prepared their story, rehearsing the accusations he'd make, the responses she'd give. It felt wrong, twisting the truth into this shape. But politics had never been about truth. It was about perception, about who could tell the most believable story. And they were about to tell one hell of a story. That night, camped in the forest outside Arkhaven, Ronan and Alara sat by their tiny, carefully hidden fire. This is going to work, Ronan said, but he didn't sound convinced. It has to. And if it doesn't, if Merrick sees through it, then we improvise, like you said. Ronan was quiet for a long moment. Then, I'm sorry. For what? For banishing you, for not listening when you tried to reject the bond, for all of it. You didn't know. I should have trusted that you had a reason. Alara looked at him across the fire. I broke your heart to save your life. That's not something you should have had to just accept. Still, they fell silent. The fire crackled. Somewhere in the distance, an owl called. Alara, Ronan said finally, if we survive this, when we survive this, the bond, can it be repaired? Alara shook her head. I don't know. I don't think anyone's ever tried after a rejection, and there's still the curse to consider. But you're the true heir to House Corvain. That changes things. Does it? The curse was laid on the bloodline, not the title. So we're still stuck. Maybe, Alara smiled, small and sad. Or maybe we're just two people who care about each other and can't be together. It's not exactly a unique problem. It feels pretty damn unique from where I'm sitting. Yeah, it does. Ronan reached across the fire, His hand hovered in the space between them, close enough to touch, but not touching. Elara looked at his hand, at the scars on his knuckles from 100 battles, at the strength and gentleness somehow coexisting in those fingers. She reached out and took his hand. The bond flared between them, sharp and sweet and agonizing. It wasn't whole, would probably never be whole again. But it was there. A thread connecting them despite everything they'd done to sever it. "Thank you," Ronan said quietly, "for coming back, for not giving up on the kingdom." I didn't come back for the kingdom," Elara admitted. "I came back for you." They sat there, hands clasped across the fire, until Mira returned with news that everything was ready. Tomorrow, they'd walk into the Viper's Nest and gamble everything on a desperate bluff. Tonight, they had this moment, this small, stolen piece. It would have to be enough. Dawn broke cold and gray over Arkhaven, the kind of morning that felt like an omen. Elara stood in the small room Mira had secured for them, letting her guardian bind her wrists with rope that looked secure but would slip free with the right twist. The room was in a building overlooking the palace's main courtyard, close enough to see the nobles arriving for the emergency council session. "You don't have to do this," Mira said for the 10th time. "Yes, I do. He could actually have you executed. You know that, right? If this goes wrong, if Merrick calls his bluff, then I die. But at least I'll die fighting." Elara tested the ropes. They held, but didn't bite. "How many people did you get?" 14, scattered throughout the chamber. Servants, minor guards, a few clerks. Nobody important enough to draw attention. And they all understand the signal? When Ronan touches his left shoulder, they move, create chaos, get you out. Elara nodded. It was a thin plan, full of holes, but it was what they had. Ronan entered the room, already dressed in full royal regalia, crown, ceremonial armor, the works. He looked every inch the Alpha King, powerful, commanding, untouchable. But Elara could see the tension in his shoulders, the tightness around his eyes. "The council is assembling," he said. "We need to move." Mira handed Elara a rough cloak to hide the dress underneath. "Last chance to run." Not a chance. They made their way through the back streets, Ronan in front, Elara stumbling behind with her wrists bound, Mira bringing up the rear. To anyone watching, it looked like the king had captured a criminal and was bringing her to justice. Which, technically, was true, just not in the way it appeared. The palace was swarming with guards, far more than usual. House Corvain's colors were everywhere, mixed with royal black and silver. Merrick had been busy consolidating his forces. They entered through a side entrance, one that led directly to the council chamber's upper gallery. The room was already full, nobles packed into every seat, faces tense with anticipation. Lord Merrick sat at the head of the council table, playing the concerned statesman. When he saw Ronan enter with Elara in tow, his face went through several expressions before settling on carefully neutral. "Your Majesty," he said, standing, "we were not expecting you to attend this session." "I'm aware of what this session is about," Ronan said coldly. "I thought I should be present for my own deposition." Nervous laughter rippled through the chamber. "It's not a deposition, sire," another noble said, Lord Garrett, one of Merrick's allies. "We're simply concerned about certain behaviors, certain decisions that seem—" "Compromised?" Ronan finished. "Yes, I've heard the accusations that I've been acting erratically, making poor choices, showing signs of dark influence." "Well, yes, you're absolutely right." The chamber went silent. Ronan shoved Elara forward. She stumbled, fell to her knees in front of the council table, head bowed. "I was compromised," Ronan continued, "by this woman, Elara Thorne. Or should I say, Elara Corvain." Merrick's carefully neutral expression cracked. "What did you say?" "You heard me. This woman is House Corvain, the legitimate line, actually. Daughter of Lyanna Corvain, who disappeared 26 years ago." The chamber erupted in shocked murmurs. Merrick's face had gone pale. "That's impossible," he said. "Lyanna Corvain died in exile. She had no children." "She had a daughter, this daughter." Ronan walked around Elara like she was a prize he'd won. "She came to the Blood Moon ceremony knowing exactly what she was. knowing that our bond would give her influence over me. She rejected me publicly to make it seem like she had no power, then disappeared to the Ashlands, where she spent months building a network of exiles loyal to her. Your Majesty, this is... Merrick started. I'm not finished. Ronan's voice cracked like a whip. 3 days ago she returned, infiltrated the palace, tried to convince me that House Corvain, your house, Lord Merrick, was plotting against the throne. That's ridiculous. Is it? Ronan pulled out Mira's journal, the one with the sketches from the garrison. She showed me evidence of dark magic being used to create corrupted wolves, claimed you were running a secret mine in the Ashlands using enslaved workers. All very convincing. Merrick had recovered some of his composure. And you believed these lies? I almost did. The evidence was compelling. But then I realized, who benefits from me believing House Corvain is a traitor? Who would gain if I turned on my most powerful ally? Alara kept her head down, watching through her lashes as the nobles processed this. Some looked confused, others skeptical. A few were nodding along with Ronan's logic. She's trying to take what her mother failed to claim, Ronan continued, the Corvain title, the Corvain power, and she's willing to destroy the kingdom to get it. Your Majesty, Lord Garrett said carefully, if this woman is truly the legitimate Corvain heir, that changes the succession. The succession means nothing if the heir is a traitor, Ronan cut in, which is why I'm calling for an immediate trial. Right here, right now. Let the council hear her testimony, examine the evidence, and decide her fate. Merrick looked trapped. If he protested too much, he'd look like he was defending a traitor. If he stayed silent, Ronan controlled the narrative. Of course, Your Majesty, he said smoothly. The council is at your disposal. Ronan gestured to 2 guards. One Alara recognized from Mira's list of plants. Bring her forward. They hauled Alara to her feet and positioned her in front of the council table. She kept her expression blank, submissive, even as her heart hammered. State your name, Ronan commanded. Alara Thorne, she said quietly. Your real name. She hesitated, just long enough to seem reluctant. Alara Corvain. More murmurs from the nobles. And you claim to be the legitimate heir to House Corvain? I am the legitimate heir. Lord Merrick's father stole the title after my mother fled. Merrick shot to his feet. This is absurd. My father was Liana's uncle, next in line after her father died. The succession was legal and documented. Was it? Alara met his eyes for the first time. Or did you just destroy any documents that proved otherwise? You have no proof. I have my mother's journal, written in her own hand, detailing the true succession and why she fled, which could easily be forged. It could, Ronan interjected, which is why we'll have it examined by the royal archivists, along with the birth records from the lower quarter, the testimony of her guardian, and any other evidence we can gather. This was the dangerous part. If Merrick was smart, he'd demand to see the journal immediately, have his own people examine it, but if he did that, he'd be admitting he saw Alara as a real threat to his claim. Merrick seemed to realize this. He sat back down, forcing a smile. Of course. Let the archivists examine everything. I have nothing to hide. Excellent, Ronan said. Now, let's discuss the accusations she made against you. She claimed I was running a secret mine in the Ashlands, using enslaved exiles to dig for silver steel. Merrick's tone was almost amused. It's laughable. The Ashlands are a wasteland. There's no silver steel there. She also claimed you were creating corrupted wolves through dark magic. Even more absurd. Then you won't mind if I send a team to investigate the old garrison east of the city? For just a fraction of a second, Merrick's mask slipped. His eyes went cold and calculating. Then the mask was back. Not at all. Though I'm not sure what you expect to find in an abandoned ruin. We'll see. Ronan turned to the council. Here's what I propose. We hold Alara Corvain in custody while the archivists examine her evidence. We send investigators to verify her claims about the garrison and the mine, and we reconvene in 3 days to hear their findings. And if her claims prove false, Lord Garrett asked, then she's executed as a traitor and infiltrator. And if they prove true? Ronan's smile was sharp. Then we have a different conversation about treason. The council voted. It wasn't unanimous. Several nobles loyal to Merrick tried to argue for immediate execution, but the majority agreed to Ronan's proposal. Alara was remanded to the palace dungeons. Ronan appointed a team of investigators from houses he still trusted, and the council adjourned in chaos, nobles arguing with each other as they filed out. As the guards led Alara away, she caught Ronan's eye. He touched his left shoulder briefly, the signal, then turned away. The plan was in motion. Now they just had to survive it. The dungeon was exactly as unpleasant as Alara expected. Cold stone, damp air, rats skittering in the corners. The cell they put her in was small, with a thin mat on the floor and a bucket in the corner for necessities. But the guard who locked her in, a woman with kind eyes, pressed a key into her palm along with the lock. "Third bell after midnight," she whispered. "Be ready." Then she was gone, and Alara was alone with her thoughts. She sat on the mat and worked her wrists free of the ropes. Her hands were shaking, not from fear, from the adrenaline slowly draining out of her system. They'd done it. They'd gotten Ronan into a position where he could investigate without seeming compromised, where he could expose Merrick's crimes as a king protecting his kingdom, not a desperate man fighting back. Now they just needed the investigation to actually find evidence before Merrick had time to destroy it all. Hours crawled by. Alara dozed fitfully, jerking awake at every sound. Guards passed her cell twice, checking locks, but neither of them looked at her. Then, sometime around what she guessed was midnight, she heard new sounds, shouting from somewhere above, the clash of steel on steel, fighting in the palace. Alara was on her feet instantly, pressing herself against the cell door, trying to hear more. More shouts, running footsteps, and then screaming, the same kind of inhuman screaming she'd heard at the garrison. Merrick had unleashed his corrupted wolves inside the palace. The door at the end of the dungeon corridor crashed open. Mira ran through, followed by 3 others from her network of favors. "We're out of time," Mira gasped, fumbling with keys at Alara's cell. "Merrick's making his move now. He's got those monsters loose in the palace." "Where's Ronan?" "Barricaded in the throne room with whatever guards stayed loyal. But there aren't many. Merrick's been more thorough than we thought." The cell door swung open. Mira shoved a sword into Alara's hands. "We need to get to him," Alara said. "We need to get you out of the city," Mira countered. "That was the plan." The plan changed. Alara pushed past her guardian and ran for the stairs. She heard Mira curse behind her, then the sound of people following. The palace was a war zone. Bodies littered the corridors, guards, servants, nobles who'd been caught in the wrong place. Some had been killed by weapons. Others had been torn apart. Alara ran through the carnage, heading for the throne room. She'd lived here for 3 weeks before the ceremony. She knew these halls, knew the fastest routes. She also knew where Merrick would position his forces if he was smart. A corrupted wolf came around a corner, all red eyes and slavering jaws. Alara didn't hesitate. She drove her sword up under its jaw, angling for the brain. The creature died with a gurgling howl. Another one charged from a side passage. One of Mira's people, a young man named Fen, intercepted it, his spear catching it in the chest. The wolf's momentum drove them both into a wall. Fen screamed as claws raked his side. Alara yanked her sword free and killed the second wolf. But Fen was down, bleeding heavily. "Go," he gasped. "I'll catch up." He wouldn't. They both knew it. Alara squeezed his hand once, then kept running. The throne room doors were ahead, barricaded from the inside. Alara could hear fighting beyond. The clash of weapons, shouted orders, the howls of corrupted wolves. She pounded on the door. "It's Alara! Let me in!" A gap appeared in the barricade. Hands reached through, pulling her inside. The barricade slammed back into place just as another wolf hit it from outside. Inside the throne room, maybe 30 people were making a desperate stand. Some were guards in royal armor. Others were nobles who'd grabbed whatever weapons they could find. A few were servants armed with kitchen knives and fireplace pokers. And at the center, coordinating the defense, was Ronan. He saw her, and something like relief flashed across his face. Then it was gone, replaced by command. "North door is weak," he was shouting. "Reinforce it. And someone get... Alara, what are you doing here?" "Helping you not die." That wasn't the plan. Plans change. Where's Merrick? Outside somewhere, directing his forces. He's got maybe 100 soldiers and at least 20 of those corrupted things. "Can we hold?" Ronan's smile was grim. "Ask me in 10 minutes." The north door splintered. Two corrupted wolves forced their way through. The defenders surged forward, driving them back with spears and swords and sheer desperate courage. But for every wolf they killed, it seemed like two more appeared. They were losing. Alara fought beside Ronan, their movements falling into an unconscious synchronization. The broken bond still connected them, still let them anticipate each other's moves. A wolf came at Ronan's blind side. Alara intercepted it. A soldier broke formation, panicking. Ronan caught him, shoved him back into line. They fought like they'd been fighting together for years instead of minutes. But it wasn't enough. The defenders were being pushed back step by step toward the throne itself. People were dying. The floor was slick with blood. "We need to fall back to the inner chamber," someone shouted. "There's no exit from there," Ronan shot back. "We'd be trapped. We're trapped now." Alara looked around desperately. The throne room had multiple entrances, all currently blocked by enemies. The windows were too high and too narrow. The only other way out was... Her eyes landed on the raised dais where the throne sat. On the floor behind it, barely visible, was a small grate. "The drainage system," she said. Ronan followed her gaze. "That leads to the sewers. Better than here. We'd have to get everyone through while holding the doors. That's impossible." "So is winning this fight." Ronan looked at the battered, exhausted defenders, looked at the doors starting to crack under repeated impacts, made a decision. "Everyone back," he roared. "Fall back to the dais. We're going through the grate." People started retreating, some helping wounded comrades. Alara and a handful of others formed a rear guard, holding the line as the rest of the defenders pried up the grate. The main doors finally gave way. Soldiers and wolves poured in. "Go!" Alara screamed at Ronan. "Get them out! Not without you!" A corrupted wolf lunged at her. She ducked, drove her sword through its ribs. Another came from the side. She couldn't dodge fast enough. Ronan was there, his blade taking the wolf's head off in one clean strike. "Together," he said. They fought back to back, giving the others time to escape through the grate. One by one, the defenders dropped into the darkness below. Finally, it was just Ronan and Alara left. "Your turn," Ronan said. "You first. You're the king. And you're—" He cut himself off. "Just go." Alara dropped through the grate. She splashed into ankle-deep water that smelled like everything foul. Ronan came through a second later, and together they yanked the grate back into place. Above, they heard soldiers reaching the dais. Heard someone shouting to force the grate open. "Move!" Ronan ordered. They ran through the sewers, the ceiling so low they had to hunch over. Water splashed around their feet. The darkness was absolute except for the few torches people had managed to grab. Behind them, the sound of pursuit. The sewers branched and twisted. They took turns at random, hoping to lose their pursuers in the maze. Some people fell, exhausted. Others helped them up, kept them moving. Finally, they saw light ahead, the glow of daylight through a drainage grate. They emerged in a ditch outside the palace walls, filthy and bleeding and alive. Ronan did a quick head count. 23 people had made it out. 7 less than had been in the throne room. "We need to keep moving," he said. "Merrick will have the city gates watched." "Where do we go?" someone asked. Ronan looked at Alara. "The Ashlands." "That's days away. We'll never make it on foot with wounded." "Then we find horses, steal them if we have to." Ronan addressed the group. "Anyone who wants to leave, do it now. Go home. Hide. Pray Merrick doesn't come for you. I won't hold it against you." No one moved. "Right," Ronan said. "Then let's go remind House Corvain what happens when you betray the crown." They moved through the city like ghosts, using back alleys and abandoned buildings. Mira had connections everywhere, and she called in every remaining favor to get them supplies, horses, information about patrol routes. By the time Merrick's soldiers figured out they'd escaped, they were already beyond the city walls, riding hard for the borderlands. They reached the Ashlands 3 days later. The settlement where Alara had lived was still ruins, scorched earth and collapsed buildings marking where people had tried to make lives from nothing. But the survivors had returned, and they'd brought others, exiles from other settlements, word having spread about the stand against Corvain's soldiers. Maybe 100 people waited in the ruins, and at their head was Dane, his arm in a sling but his eyes fierce. "Heard you were coming," he said when Alara dismounted. "Heard you're starting a war." Not starting, Alara said. Finishing one. She stood on a piece of rubble and addressed the gathered exiles, told them everything about House Corvain's corruption, about the cursed bloodline, about Merrick's attempt to seize the throne. He thinks we're nothing, she said. Trash he can dispose of whenever it's convenient. Slaves he can use for his mines and his experiments. He thinks because we're exiles, we don't matter. The crowd was silent, listening. But we do matter. We're still citizens of this kingdom, whether Arkhaven remembers that or not. And what happens at the throne affects us just as much as it affects anyone else. So what do you want us to do? Someone called out. I want you to fight, not for me, not for the king, for yourselves, for the right to be treated like people instead of disposable labor. Alara paused. I won't lie to you. This is going to be brutal. We're outnumbered, out-equipped, and nobody's coming to save us. But if we win, if we can expose what Merrick's doing and stop him, then maybe things change. Maybe exiles stop being forgotten. She expected doubt, expected people to question whether it was worth the risk. Instead, a woman stepped forward, the same woman Alara had saved from the soldiers months ago. My daughter's alive because of you. I'll fight. Another person joined her, then another, then dozens, until nearly everyone had stepped forward. Dane grinned. Looks like you've got an army. Now what? Now came the hard part. Over the next week, they prepared. Ronan trained people who'd never held weapons properly. Alara worked the forge day and night, making arms and armor from scavenged metal. Mira coordinated scouts, building a network to track Merrick's movements. And slowly, word spread beyond the Ashlands. Farmers who'd been taxed into poverty, merchants tired of Corvain's monopolies, minor nobles who'd been pushed aside by Merrick's power plays. People were angry. They'd just never had a reason to act on it before. Now they did. 2 weeks after fleeing the palace, their ragtag force marched on Arkhaven. Not directly, they couldn't take the city by force, but to the open plain outside where traditionally succession disputes were settled. Through combat, Ronan issued the challenge himself, riding to the city gates under a white flag. Lord Merrick of House Corvain, he called, his voice carrying. I accuse you of treason, corruption, and the use of dark magic against the crown. I challenge your claim to power. Meet me on the challenge field at dawn, or be named a coward before the kingdom. Merrick appeared on the walls. Even from a distance, Alara could see the rage on his face. You're already a dead man, Vale, he called back. You just don't know it yet. Then prove it. Dawn. The challenge field? Or are you afraid? Merrick disappeared from the walls without answering. But the next morning, as the sun rose red over the plain, he was there. He'd brought an army, at least 300 soldiers plus a dozen corrupted wolves on chains. Ronan's force numbered maybe 200, counting everyone who could hold a weapon. They lined up facing each other across the challenge field. This was the old way, the way succession disputes had been settled for 1,000 years. Two forces, two leaders, fighting until one side yielded or was destroyed. The winner was right. The loser was forgotten. Merrick rode forward, resplendent in silver armor. You can't win this, boy. I have the gold, the soldiers, the power. What do you have? The truth, Ronan said simply. Merrick laughed. The truth doesn't matter. It never has. Then why are you so afraid of it? Merrick's smile vanished. He raised his hand. The corrupted wolves were released. They charged across the field, moving impossibly fast. Ronan's front line braced, spears lowering. The wolves hit like a wave of teeth and claws and fury. The battle was chaos from the first second. Alara found herself fighting beside farmers and blacksmiths and people who'd never seen real combat. They died quickly, screaming, but they kept fighting. She saw Dane take down a wolf with nothing but a broken spear in sheer rage. Saw Mira kill a soldier with a hammer blow that caved in his helmet. Saw Ronan cutting through enemy ranks, his sword painting arcs of red in the air. She fought her way toward Merrick. He saw her coming and smiled. The false heir, he called. Come to die for a crown you'll never wear? I don't want the crown, Alara shouted back. I want you to pay for what you've done. You'll have to get through them first, he gestured. 3 corrupted wolves turned toward her, their red eyes fixed and hungry. Alara raised her sword. Her wolf surged inside her chest. Not the broken, hidden thing it had been, but something fierce and whole. The curse was still there, still dangerous, but for this moment, she didn't care. She let her wolf rise. Not a full transformation, just enough to flood her muscles with strength, sharpen her senses, make her faster than any human should be. The first wolf lunged. She sidestepped, her blade taking it across the throat. The second came from the side. She caught it on her blade, the impact jarring her arms, then twisted and drove the sword through its eye. The third was smarter. It circled, waiting for an opening. Alara didn't give it one. She attacked first, forcing it back, driving it toward where Ronan was fighting. He saw her coming and adjusted his position without a word. They fought the wolf together, their movements synchronized by the broken bond. It tried to go for Ronan. Alara cut it off. It turned on her. Ronan's blade found its spine. The wolf fell. Merrick was screaming orders now, his composure cracking. His army was being pushed back not by superior tactics or weapons, but by sheer determination. By people who'd decided they'd rather die fighting than live on their knees. Enough! Merrick roared. He's dismounted, drawing his own sword. I'll end this myself! He strode toward Ronan. The fighting around them slowed, people on both sides backing away to give them space. This was it. The true challenge. Leader against leader. Ronan stepped forward to meet him. No, Alara said. Both men looked at her. This isn't your fight alone, she continued. He corrupted exiles, enslaved my people. This is as much mine as yours. She's not even, Merrick started. I'm the legitimate heir to House Corvain, Alara cut in, which means I have the right to challenge you for the title. Or are you going to deny that too? Merrick's face twisted with rage. Fine, come die, little Omega. He attacked before she'd fully raised her sword. His blade came down in a brutal overhead strike that would have split her skull if she hadn't rolled aside. She came up swinging, but he was already moving, his blade flashing in the morning sun. He was good, trained by the best sword masters money could buy. Alara was just a blacksmith's apprentice who'd learned to fight in the Ashlands. But she was also Omega, and when she let her wolf rise fully, accepting the power and the curse and everything that came with it, she became something more. They traded blows, steel ringing against steel. Merrick was stronger, more skilled, but Alara was faster, more desperate, fighting for everyone who'd ever been thrown away and told they didn't matter. She saw an opening, just a fraction of a second where his guard dropped. She took it, driving her blade toward his chest. Merrick caught her wrist, twisted. Her sword fell from suddenly nerveless fingers. You lose, he said. Then his eyes widened. He looked down. Alara's other hand held a knife, the small, crude blade she'd carried since the Ashlands. She'd driven it up under his ribs, angling for the heart. No, she said. You do. Merrick fell. The battlefield went silent. Alara stood over Merrick's body, breathing hard, covered in blood. Around her, soldiers on both sides were lowering their weapons, staring. She raised her voice so everyone could hear. Lord Merrick of House Corvain is dead. By right of combat and bloodline, I claim the Corvain title and all that comes with it. She paused. And my first act as Lady Corvain is to order his soldiers to stand down. This battle is over. For a long moment, no one moved. Then one of Merrick's captains dropped his sword. Then another. Then the whole army was surrendering, their corrupted wolves collapsing as whatever magic had sustained them failed. The battle was won. The aftermath took weeks to sort out. Merrick's allies were arrested, his assets seized, his secret operations shut down. The enslaved workers in the Silver Steel mine were freed, the garrison was destroyed, and every corrupted wolf was put down. The council held an emergency session to address the succession. Alara presented her mother's journal, her birth records, testimony from Mira, and dozens of others who'd known Liana. The council declared her the legitimate heir to House Corvain. She immediately stripped most of the house's power, redistributing lands to minor nobles and merchants, breaking up the monopolies that had let Merrick accumulate so much influence. Some of the council protested. Alara didn't care. House Corvain was built on theft and corruption, she told them. I'm not interested in continuing that legacy. As for Ronan, he was restored to full power as Alpha King. The nobles who'd supported Merrick's coup were exiled, ironically, to the Ashlands, and replaced with people who'd proven their loyalty. But there was still one problem. One thing they couldn't fix through politics or power: the bond, and the curse that came with it. They met in the royal gardens 3 weeks after the battle, under a sky full of stars. "I've been researching," Ronan said, "talking to scholars, mages, anyone who might know about the curse. And? And there might be a way. Not to break the curse. It's too old, too deeply woven into the bloodline, but to redirect it, transfer it to someone who's already dying, someone with nothing to lose." Alara's breath caught. "You found someone willing?" "There's a mage in the northern provinces. He's got maybe 6 months left, some kind of wasting disease. He says if the curse would give him the power to make those 6 months count, he'd take it." "That's..." Alara didn't know what to say. "Are you sure it would work?" "No, but it's a chance." Ronan stepped closer. "If you want to take it." Alara looked at him, at the man she'd rejected to save, the king who'd lost everything because of her choice. "I don't know if I can risk it," she admitted. "What if it doesn't work? What if we bond and the curse activates anyway?" "Then we deal with it, together." "That's not a plan." "It's all I've got." Alara laughed, rough and tired. "You know what? That's good enough." They performed the ritual 2 days later, in a small ceremony with only Mira and a handful of trusted friends present. The mage from the north was there, his hands glowing with arcane light as he worked to redirect the curse from Alara's bloodline to his own dying body. When it was done, when the curse had been pulled away like a splinter being extracted, Alara felt lighter than she had in months. And when Ronan took her hand, pressing his bleeding palm to hers, the bond reformed, not broken this time, not forced, just right. The golden thread between them snapped into place, and Alara gasped at the intensity of it. She could feel Ronan's emotions, his relief and joy and love washing over her like a wave. He pulled her close, and she let him, burying her face in his chest and breathing in pine and steel and home. "I'm sorry," she whispered, "for everything I put you through." "Don't be. You saved me, saved the kingdom." He pulled back just enough to look at her. "You saved everyone." "We saved everyone." "Fine. We're both heroes. Now can I kiss you?" Alara laughed. "You're the king. You don't need to ask permission." "I'm asking anyway." She answered by pulling him down and kissing him herself. It wasn't perfect. It wasn't smooth. They were both still healing from 100 wounds, physical and otherwise. But it was real. And it was theirs. 3 months later, they held a proper bonding ceremony. Not under a blood moon this time, just under regular sky with regular witnesses who weren't waiting for everything to go wrong. Alara wore a dress she'd chosen herself, simple blue fabric that didn't make her feel like a sacrifice. Ronan wore his crown but managed to smile, which was apparently a first at these kinds of events. When the priestess asked if they accepted the bond freely, without coercion, they both said yes. And this time, when their bleeding palms touched, there was no curse, no corruption, just a bond, freely chosen, stronger for having been broken and repaired. The kingdom threw a celebration that lasted 3 days. On the 4th day, Alara rode out to the Ashlands. She'd been working on something with Ronan's backing, something that mattered more than ceremonies or politics. The settlement had been rebuilt. Properly this time, with real buildings and a well and fields that had been cleared of ash and treated with fertilizers from the capital. It wasn't much, but it was a start. Alara dismounted and walked through the small community. People greeted her, not as a noble, just as Alara, the woman who'd stood with them when no one else would. She found Dane overseeing the construction of a new forge. His arm had healed, though he'd always have a scar. "Thought you'd be too busy being Lady Corvain to visit," he said. "I'm still just Alara. The title's just paperwork." "Right. Paperwork that comes with armies and treasuries and political power, which I'm using to make sure exiles actually have rights now. Real rights, not just hopes." Dane nodded slowly. "Heard about the new laws. No more banishment without trial. No more permanent exile for minor crimes. Compensation for anyone who was enslaved by Corvain's operations. It's not enough to fix everything, but it's something. It's more than we've ever had." They stood in silence for a moment, watching the forge take shape. "Cale would have liked this," Dane said quietly. "Seeing the Ashlands become something other than a death sentence." Alara's throat tightened. She still thought about Kael sometimes, about the woman who'd taken her in when she had nothing, who'd taught her to survive, who'd sacrificed herself so others could escape. "We should name the forge after her," Alara said. "Yeah, we should." Alara stayed in the Ashlands for a week, working alongside the rebuilding efforts. When she finally rode back to Arkhaven, she felt lighter. The kingdom was changing, slowly, messily, but changing. And for the first time since the Blood Moon ceremony, Alara felt like maybe, just maybe, she was exactly where she was supposed to be. Ronan met her at the palace gates, already pulling her from the saddle before she'd fully stopped. "Missed you," he said against her hair. "I was gone a week. Long week." She laughed and kissed him, not caring that there were guards watching, nobles passing by, servants trying not to stare. Let them look. Let them see an Alpha King bonded to an Omega who'd started as nothing and refused to stay that way. That night they stood on the balcony of the royal chambers, looking out over the city. Lights twinkled in the darkness, thousands of lives going about their business, unaware of how close they'd come to losing everything. "Do you think the council will ever fully accept me?" Alara asked. "Some will, some won't. Does it matter?" "Not really." "Good, because you're stuck with the title now. And with you. Especially with me." Ronan wrapped his arms around her from behind. "Think we can actually make this work? A blacksmith's apprentice and a king?" "We already did. Everything else is just details." He laughed, low and warm. "I love you." "I know." "That's it? That's all I get?" Alara turned in his arms, grinning. "I rejected you in front of the entire court, got myself exiled, survived the Ashlands, started a war, and killed a corrupt lord to save your kingdom. What more do you want?" "Fair point." He kissed her forehead. "But I'd still like to hear you say it." "Fine. I love you too." "Happy?" "Very." They stood there as the city lights glowed below, two people who'd been broken and remade, who'd chosen each other even when fate had tried to tear them apart. The kingdom had a long way to go. There would be more battles, more challenges, more times when everything seemed impossible, but they'd faced worse, and they'd do it together. Alara Thorne, formerly of the Lower Quarter, formerly of the Ashlands, now Lady Corvain and bonded mate to the Alpha King, smiled up at the stars and thought about a woman named Kael, who'd once told her that being useful was the key to survival. She'd been wrong. The key to survival was refusing to be anything less than what you were, even when the whole world told you that you were nothing. And Alara had never been nothing. She just needed to prove it.